I know.
A little hot, isn't it?
Work on my tan, though.
But you're gonna end up with like this tan line
Yeah.
now around here.
That's all right. This is a new thing. It's a new thing.
Okay. 7 o'clock, I'd like to call the meeting to order. Invite everyone to please rise and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Would you call the roll, please?
Nelson,
Here.
Shiloh,
Here.
Davy,
Here.
Jacobson,
Here.
Jones,
Present.
Friend,
Here.
Dombeck,
Here.
quorum is present.
Are there any changes to the agenda as proposed? Okay. Just as a prefatory comment, if you notice, we have changed the order of things from our usual order. Typically, we would have audience to visitors before our superintendent's report, but given the circumstances and given that there's going to be some discussion about the plan, that some more detail hopefully is going to be revealed, and there might be some comments that people would wish to make after we have that presentation. So we're going to delay audience to visitors and audience participation until after the presentation on the back-to-school plan. So also wanted to give Steve Nelson an opportunity to make an explanation about his mask, which he's received some questions about.
Yeah, so just to clarify things, I have heard a couple of comments as to why I'm not wearing a mask, and although I'm not going to go into the detail, I do have a medical condition that does not allow me to wear a mask. So I'm doing what I can to accommodate the necessity of protecting both everyone around me and myself. So that's why I'm wearing a face shield. That's what I do all day long when I'm out with clients and stuff as well. So I just wanted to clarify, it's not a political statement, it's an actual medical condition. Thanks.
Okay, is there a motion to adopt the agenda as presented?
So moved. Seconded.
Moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Superintendent's report.
Okay, I'll wait for the PowerPoint, the slideshow to come up. As has been the past history in Sycamore and the school district, I would like to just kind of refer to our mission before I start my report, empowering our learners to succeed in their world, as well as the district's vision. And this was developed long before I got here. It's been in place for quite some time. You're all familiar with that. Core values: honesty, trustworthiness, integrity, equality, empathy, respect, citizenship, digital citizenship, responsibility, and collaboration. And then professional learning communities. We actually talked a little bit about this afternoon. These have been in place for a while too, and just want to remind everybody that these are some of the things that guide the work that we do within the school district. So with that, the focus of tonight's special meeting is to discuss updates to our return to learning plan, and that involves a lot of different pieces within the school district, and the biggest piece is teaching and learning, which we'll get to in just a second. There is one important update that I'm going to touch on as we get going. If we could go to I think it's the first slide. Oscar. There's been a lot of question about Oscar and whether or not we would be able to provide the Oscar program this year. I've worked with staff within the district for quite a while, trying to figure out a way that we could make Oscar work, and unfortunately, we don't see a path to offering Oscar, primarily because of space, because of staffing, and some of the circumstances beyond our control. Courtney's done a phenomenal job looking at this every which way and just has not been able to make it work. So we need to communicate that tonight so that our community knows that, so they can start making some plans. Childcare, however, also is an issue, and that's another kind of a separate issue, childcare during the day, that we've been trying to address, and Courtney's done a phenomenal job with that as well. We do think that we can provide daycare at a cost to staff within the district during the school day for school-age children. We're going to have to use some space within the school district, but that's going to be pretty minimal, at least based on the preliminary numbers that we've gotten for that. We recognize still that there's a need for childcare within the community. So Courtney's also reached out to area organizations, including the Park District and the YMCA, which I think are indicated there. They are both willing and or already planning to provide daycare to families as the school year gets started. So as we get questions and requests for daycare, we'll share that information. It's part of the overall plan that's going to be on the district website as well. Courtney's also continuing to work with other organizations within the community. So as we become aware of other organizations that will be able to provide daycare, we'll list those as well and include those resources for the community. Unfortunately, we couldn't do Oscar. We think we can do daycare for staff within the district, but that's kind of where we're at with Oscar and daycare. Any questions for me?
Will we transport to those childcare opportunities at the Y or the Park District?
We don't plan to do that at this point. Transportation is going to be a bit of a struggle because of the things that we're going to do with transportation. I think we'll get into that a little bit tonight. So we don't plan on providing transportation to the Park District or to the YMCA. Any other questions for me about that topic?
No, I would just say that the more that we can work as an entity to be the source for all of those daycare opportunities in the community, whether that's private homes or public partnerships, whatever we can do to make ourselves the primary resource that parents can go to find out what is available in the area, I think the better. So hopefully that's something that we can help fill the needs of.
We can. I agree wholeheartedly, and I know that Courtney is committed to doing that. So that's exactly what we'll do. Okay, at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Webster, who's going to talk about the teaching and learning portion of the return to learning plan.
Hi, everybody. Well, I'm happy to see you again. It's been only a week, but it's always a pleasure to be here. So tonight, I hope to be able to fill in some blanks of some of the questions you may have had last week, both for you and for the community, and I apologize if I'm a little muffled. I feel like I sound a little muffled, but I'm safe, so that's important. I'm also going to try and use this handy-dandy remote, and usually I go too many slides ahead, so let's see how we do. Okay, so the first thing I want to talk about is dismissal, arrival and dismissal, and just the overall schedule. So just as a reminder, we will be following an A-B day for hybrid. A days will be Monday and Wednesday. B days will be Tuesday and Thursday. Fridays will be alternating weekly A-B schedules. Families will be assigned the same A-B schedule so that we can make sure that we don't have multiple family members going on different schedules. And we also have clarified our start and end times for this school year. So elementary schools will start their day at 8:50 and they will end at 2:20. The middle school will start at 7:50 and will end at 12:40. And the high school will start at 7:45 and will end at 12:58 on their in-person days. We made that modification to the schedules for transportation purposes just to make sure we could route correctly. And as I go through more through the plan, it will help kind of elucidate why those changes were made. As far as lunches go, I know this was another question that we had. So our elementary students will receive lunch during the school day. They will receive lunch during our scheduled part of the school day. Our middle school and high school students will have the opportunity for a grab-and-go style lunch at the end of the day. And all of our students will have the opportunity to bring snacks from home to graze on during the day. We know that some people prefer to eat at mealtime. Some kids do better with grazing throughout the morning. So we're really providing both options for our students. Grading and attendance. I know these were two big areas we got a lot of feedback on. and that will be different this year just because of the circumstances that we're in. So ISB has really strongly encouraged school districts to return to traditional grading. In the spring, they had very strongly encouraged school districts to step away from traditional grading because of the situation that we were in. But this year we will be returning to traditional grading. So we want to ensure that all of our students receive formative feedback to help them grow as learners. So when we hear grading, it sounds almost has a punitive or a gotcha feel to it. And really our focus is on really providing that formative feedback for our students and families. And grades are one tool to provide that feedback. So we will be returning to our regular grading process for assignments and activities that are completed whether the students are in class or performing their work remote at home. Obviously, we will take into account any unique situations or circumstances that may arise when we're formulating those grades, but it will be a traditional grading policy. Attendance as well. Last year, at the end of last year when we moved to remote learning, ISB strongly suggested that we not keep formal attendance. We kept engagement, but we did not keep formal attendance. That will change. This year we will be going back to regular daily attendance as we have done traditionally. Daily attendance and engagement. So not just showing up, but showing up and participating. Will be expected of all of our students, whether they're physically in school or whether they're learning remotely from home. Our teachers or other school staff members will contact any families if we're identifying students who are absent, or if they're here but just not engaging in their classes. And so we will be following up as we would in a traditional school year. That's exactly what we would do in a regular school year. And we do ask, though, if a child is sick, that the parent make sure that they contact the school so that we can document the illness. And that would be on a day, even if they were on their day where they were working at home, we would like that call as well, just so we can keep track. Because obviously, if you don't feel well at home, you're still not going to be necessarily up to doing your work that day. So we also had received quite a few questions about special education. So we wanted to clarify some things for our students with IEPs and 504s. So we know that there's a very unique and diverse needs for our most vulnerable population. So our students that are currently in self-contained classrooms, self-contained special education classrooms, will have the option to attend school 5 days a week or to the greatest extent possible. And that's just a little bit different than last week, because I think last week we said they would attend school 5 days a week. And we realized that maybe for some of our students, that wouldn't be the best option. So we were going to work with the families to decide what they feel is the best option and will meet the best needs. So they will have the option of attending 5 days a week. Our Little Spartans early learning program will also have the option to attend school 4 days a week. They come Mondays and Thursdays. They will follow their normal half-day AM, PM schedule. Also, students that receive special education services in our regular resource program, they'll have the opportunity to participate either in the hybrid model or they also may choose the remote online option. We will provide services for all of our special education students, both in person as well as remotely. And every student, regardless of their placement, whether they choose to be in the hybrid model or they choose to be in the more fully online model, will have an individualized remote learning plan that will be reviewed with the family and be created together with the family to receive input and feedback so that we make sure we're meeting the needs of our students at this very different time. There may have to be some flexibility in scheduling on a case-by-case basis that we will do to make sure that we are meeting every child's unique learning needs. Ms. Riley is going to be posting a student services FAQ on our website that will have more specific and additional information for our families of students who receive special education. Also, just a note on safety as well. So all of our special education and related service staff will be following the same guidelines from IDPH, CDC, and ISB, so to make sure that all of the environments are safe and the contact we have with students are safe. So our staff members will be provided with appropriate PPE when they work with your child, or our students with special needs. To the greatest extent possible, students will be required to wear face masks As you have already seen in this board meeting, medical exceptions will require documentation from a doctor, but they may occur. That does happen. Staff members will also maintain, obviously, social distancing and hand washing, both for themselves and the children that they're working with. And we'll make sure that all materials that we use to deliver services are cleaned and disinfected between uses, and definitely given enough time to let the material dry properly to make sure that we guarantee the maximum efficacy in the disinfecting. Also, social and emotional learning and well-being, and this is something that we can elaborate a little bit more on this week as well. So we spoke a little bit last week about social and emotional learning, but I wanted to include the well-being aspect as well, because those things go in tandem. It's not just teaching about social emotional aspects of ourselves, it's also about providing them. So when our students return to school, obviously our very top priority will be their health and their safety, and that includes their emotional health. So we will continue to implement, and I said this last week as well, we have a district SEL curriculum. We will continue to follow that with the addition of a focus on any emotional health, which may have been impacted by COVID. Additionally, so that's more the social emotional learning aspect, but additionally, as far as the social emotional well-being, our teachers will schedule check-ins with their students in order to provide a safe place for children to ask questions and really share any concerns they have. We know that when our students come back, whether it's via the fully online option or whether they come back via the hybrid option, that it's going to look different this year. So we're going to make sure that we're keeping in close contact with them to answer any questions they have and to provide that sense of safety and security so they feel comfortable in this different environment. School counselors and social workers, health staff, will connect with any students who we find out are experiencing any kind of social or emotional distress. And they can also provide resources for our families, to outside resources to help if their family could use just a little extra support during this unusual time. We will continue to communicate with our families if we notice that our students are struggling. If a student is struggling, we'll definitely involve the family and again provide that support. We will be providing, kind of to Eric's point about being a resource for our families. We will be providing a list of resources, outside resources for our families on our district website in early August, so that even if maybe we haven't identified them here at school, but at home they just feel like they could use some extra support, we'll have that available to them as well. And we will continue to monitor that, and as other needs are identified, then we'll add supports. This is just our starting point, and we will definitely adapt as we identify needs when we return. Field trips. So at this time, live field trips will not be scheduled. Hopefully, and when things resolve, we'll get back to that. But for now, live field trips will not be scheduled. Fortunately, there are lots of very interesting virtual field trips that our classes can take. I put a couple up there, that Seattle Aquarium, San Diego Zoo, Yellowstone. There's all sorts of fabulous places that you can kind of do a virtual field trip. Now, obviously, it's not quite the same, but our kids would not have had the opportunity to go to the San Diego Zoo, so maybe this will give them an opportunity to see some things they wouldn't have seen before. So that is kind of a wrap-up for now of the kind of the overall picture and the hybrid learning schedule. Would you like me to pause here and answer questions on that piece of it, or would you like me to continue with the fully online piece?
I think it's better to probably just
Okay,
present
absolutely.
the whole thing, and because I don't know whether or not you'll be talking about some of the issues we'd be asking questions about
Of course.
at this point.
Before I continue, both with the fully online learning option and the hybrid option, I have received questions this week about what curriculum we'll be using. And I just wanted to clarify that we will be using the district curriculum regardless of the setting. So we'll be, whether the child is hybrid or remote, we will be using district resources in our core curriculum for our students. And that is regardless of which option they choose. So I did want to clarify that before going forward. I know that was a question that I have received. In addition to the hybrid opportunity that we're offering our students, families will also have the option of choosing a fully online learning schedule. So any family that chooses to enroll in that will do so for the first 9 weeks. At the end of 9 weeks, if they decide that they want to continue in the fully online option, they can. And if they decide at that point that they'd like to come back and try hybrid, they may do that as well. We will make every effort to make sure that all of our remote learners have reliable internet connection. We'll try to provide access to mobile hotspots as we have them as they're available. As I said earlier, grades will be assigned and attendance will be taken, even in the fully online setting. And I know the question also has been when the decision for this will be. And so once the AB schedule is released, then families will have the option to select the fully online learning option if that is the path they'd like to take. So in the fully online learning environment, there are many learning activities, and these are literally just a few. So they may include all of these things, a portion of these things, and they're absolutely not limited to these things. But this is just kind of a sampling of some of the activities that a child who is participating in an online learning environment may participate in when they are receiving online learning. So there's obviously the teacher that can deliver instruction either synchronously, which is live, or a recorded video. You'll hear the terms synchronous and asynchronous. Asynchronous means a recorded video, synchronous means live. So you'll see those words a lot in the literature as you're looking at other districts too. You can do small group work, independent work. This is a great opportunity to do self-chosen research projects. We'll be building that into the hybrid model as well. That is one of the wonderful things about technology, is it does provide a wonderful opportunity for individualized and independent personal learning activities when we go back to our district vision of anytime, anywhere learning. And really, when we talked about MCL, and providing personalized learning experiences for our student, this is one of those times that the silver linings of this opportunity is that we can get closer to meeting our vision, our district vision of doing that. And I know we've been working on that for many years, so this will help with that as well. So more specifically, to kind of talk about what this could look like, because it looks a little different at each level. So our littlest Spartans, so students who attend the Little Spartans Early Learning Program will receive their services through in-person learning. Again, as I spoke earlier, they will attend Monday through Thursday in an AM or PM session, which is what they've traditionally done as well. We are not providing an online option for our earliest childhood learners. It's just really difficult at that age to provide a robust learning experience for students in an online learning center. However, if there's a student that does have a documented medical condition and they're not able to come to school, we certainly will work with them and the team to identify their needs and meet their needs so that they still are able to access education. Elementary and middle school. So our students who are in K-8, and if they're enrolled in the fully online learning option, they will receive instruction in the core content areas and specials. We will provide their instruction at K-8 through Google Classroom. And again, it will be a combination of synchronous learning. Again, synchronous means live. And asynchronous, which also can be recorded, as well as other learning opportunities assigned by a teacher of the district. So that teacher of the district is something I wanted to clarify as well, because I know in some other places that they're using different models for providing their online learning component. It will be done by a teacher of the district. It may not necessarily be a classroom teacher from their building. So if I'm a first grade student and I'm at North Grove and I choose the online learning, it is possible that I will be with other first grade students across the district in an online classroom, maybe taught by a teacher from a different building. So that just depends. We'll have a better idea of that when we know exactly how many students we have that will be choosing this option. So for high school, the high school is always a bit different. So students who select the fully online option will be enrolled in virtual sections of designated courses. So we can say right now that those students will receive opportunities in at least English, math, science, social studies, and PE. Those are the core academic courses, as well as PE, which is the state required course. Additional courses may be available, and we'll have a better idea of that again once we have the final numbers for our online-only learning students, once we know how many students we're going to have. And again, a little bit different daily learning for them will be provided through Canvas, which is another learning management system. K-8 is using Google, 912 is using Canvas. And again, will be that combination of synchronous or live and asynchronous, which is recorded, as well as other learning opportunities. I have had several questions. I believe Julene asked the question last week of what does a day look like? And I kind of wanted to elaborate on that a little bit. So at the elementary, there will be a structure to the day. There will be a schedule. There will be the literacy block, the math block, science and social studies, specials, lunch. K-8 will be that same way. The high school will also follow a schedule, a class schedule. First period, second period, third period, fourth period. So that will be a K-8, that would be something that we would anticipate would be both in the virtual environment as well as the in-person environment. The high school, because the students are older, it will probably, depending on the age of the student, it could be a very varied ways. We want to start preparing our students for the world of online learning as they go to college. So there will be a couple of different ways that will be offered, or could be offered. So there will be some more flexibility at the high school. They still will have regular contact with their teachers. But they still will have a schedule. It's just that the way the scheduling is done at the high school, it just looks different than it does K-8. Using district curriculum. I know that's a big question too, so I want to reiterate that. Again, just to reiterate attendance, even for our fully online students, daily attendance and engagement is required. Our students will be required to submit daily learning activities to their teacher and or participate in scheduled synchronous learning opportunities. And we'll record that as their attendance, as for their engagement. So there are lots of different ways that we can take attendance with remote learning. It can be by submitting an activity, it can be by a virtual conference, like a morning meeting, that type of thing. Our teachers will be required to monitor and report student attendance every day, as we would in an in-person setting through Infinite Campus, for each student that's enrolled in their course. Again, we want to reiterate that if, even in an online environment, if your child is sick and is not going to be participating in learning that day, that you give the office a call so that we know that child, if they're not turning something in or they haven't checked in for their daily check-in, we know that they're safe and just not able to participate due to illness that day. And again, grading, the standard grading practices and the standard grading periods will apply to online learners. That will not be any different. Clubs and activities. So for our fully online students, if they opt out of in-person learning and they go to fully online, they may participate in extracurricular activities and athletics, assuming that all health and safety protocols can be followed. Some opportunities may be limited. That's just going to depend on us following the IDPH and the county health department's guidance about running those different activities. But our remote students would be also able to participate in those. Special education, again, we have received a lot of questions about this, about what that would look like in a fully online situation. So the students, again, the students team will develop an individual remote learning plan. And again, that's a plan that's created specifically for that child to meet their academic needs and social emotional needs. Of the services that will be provided during online learning, we will, as a district and as a student services team, provide those services to the greatest extent possible. However, with online learning, some services or IEP goals may not be considered reasonable or appropriate because we may not be able to deliver them in that particular environment, which is why we would have the individual remote learning plan so that we could accommodate that, so we could figure out what else we could do to try and meet the needs of those students. Similarly, for a Section 504, if the family of a student with 504 services decides to go the online route, again, the students team will review the plan to determine which accommodations can be put in place during remote learning. Some, again, may not be reasonable or appropriate. For example, proximity to the teacher. In an online environment, that's not really an applicable goal, or allowing breaks, those sorts of things, because those things are inherently part of the remote learning option. If there is a child that's referred for evaluation, if we have concerns about a student and we want to look a little bit more deeply to see if they need a higher level of support, either through a 504 or through special education services, and there is an assessment that requires face-to-face time, we will conduct those in person so that we can make sure that we dig deeply and meet the needs of our students. That, in a nutshell, is what I have. I'm very happy to answer any questions that you have for more details.
Hey, Chris,
Yes.
I have a question about the 9-week enrollment. My concern is that what if the parents opt for that and/or the student, and then 2-3 weeks into it, they realize, wow, this is not happening, or this is not working for us. Are they roped in for that 9 weeks, or is there an option to get out if that hybrid model is still available in the classroom?
We've had that question actually both ways. What happens if I start online and I want to go hybrid, and what happens if I'm hybrid and I want to go online? The reason we put that 9 weeks in is to provide a continuity of instruction for the student. So we would strongly encourage staying with that 9 weeks, and we will follow the 9 weeks. However, if there's an extenuating circumstance, right, if something comes up and we find out that that's just not the best environment, then on a case-by-case basis, if they had a concern, they should just contact their building. And on a case-by-case basis, we'd kind of review the situation and see where the best placement was for the student.
Okay, good. It's nice to know that there is that possibility, because it just seems like suddenly school starts August 19, and then suddenly the next thing they know, they can't do anything until nearly Halloween. Just seems like a really long time.
The difficulty with that is, again, we will stick with that 9 weeks primarily unless there's some really extenuating circumstance that will cause us to deviate from that. It does cause a lot of, again, a continuity of instruction is difficult to flip the back and forth. It causes difficulty with programming and transportation and multiple levels of things. So while we'll absolutely always put the needs of our children first, our students always come before any type of schedule or transportation. It would need to be on a case-by-case basis, and it would need to be for something where that was really a necessity for that student before the 9 weeks.
Okay, good. Thank you, Chris.
You're welcome.
When do parents have to make that decision about whether they're going to have their student do online learning as opposed to
And I believe
hybrid?
that information is going to come out when they receive the AB schedule. So, Mr. Wilder, did you want to speak to that?
Yeah, I can talk to that a little bit. So the AB, our goal is to provide the AB assignment for families on Monday, so that they have a chance to know which grade or which group they fall in. Remote learning, the deadline that we're going to ask parents to make that decision is by August 7th. The other thing we'd like to do to accommodate that is recommend a change in the calendar and add 3 remote planning days on those first 3 days of student attendance. So Wednesday, August 19th, Thursday, August 20th, and Friday, August 21st. We'll ask the staff to come in. Now, this was a late development today. I literally emailed the calendar committee this afternoon, and they looked at it and got back to me, so there's support for this. But we'll do remote learning on those first 3 days, provide some additional professional development for staff, but that also gives parents, a little bit of time between making that decision and actually starting the school year. So first day for staff to report would still be Monday, August 17th, but the first day for students to report would be Monday, August 24th. So there were also some logistic issues with picking a date that was reasonable for parents, but also reasonable in terms of being able to finalize the master schedule and the course offerings at all 3 levels in the district. So that's the date that we're going to ask parents to make that decision. We'll develop an online form that we can put on the website. They can fill that out, send it to us, and that way we've got a running record that the parent or guardian has opted for remote learning, and keep track of it that way.
Steve, I know this is a monumental ask, but given the enormity of the decision of trying to find support from a daycare standpoint for families, will there be an opportunity for families to vote for being either on the A schedule or the B schedule, reflecting the fact that they may have to rely on family members or some other support network with limited availability to get their kids watched?
Sure, that's a really good question, and that's one of the accommodations we're going to make every effort to make. So what we've done is use our student management software, Infinite Campus, to divide the students up into A and B groups. It's very important that students in the same family stay together, so they're on the same schedule. So all the students in the same household are on A or on B. But we also want to try to accommodate those requests. So once those group assignments have been announced, if parents would like to request that their student or their family students are moved from one group to the other, they need to contact the building principal to do that, and then we'll work with central office staff who helps with that, registration process to consider those requests. Our goal is to accommodate as many of those as we can, while also trying to maintain balance between that A group and that B group. But we recognize that that's an issue, and we're going to do everything we can to accommodate that.
Okay, thank you.
Dr. Webster, can I just ask with the social emotional, especially with the online students, what's the delivery process there? I'm not sure if you said that and I just didn't hear you. But how are counselors, social workers, how is that going to be worked through? I mean, what about students that don't have access to computers or, whatever? I'm just asking to understand.
Absolutely.
Because that's a tough one, and I was just wondering how that's going to be worked.
Absolutely. So the goal is that all of our students will be one-to-one so that they will have the access to the computers and the hotspots if they need internet access as best as to our ability to provide that internet access. I think depending on, so in the hybrid model, obviously the first choice, if we have a student that has social emotional needs, obviously in a in-person, that would be the optimal. I mean, as a guidance counselor, former guidance counselor, you know that human conversation in an in-person setting would obviously be our first choice. But for our students that need additional services that go beyond the days that they're here, or for our students that have chosen the fully online model, then we would use the virtual method. And that would really, I can't really specifically say which one we'd use because that would really depend on what that person needed, right? So would it be, if you look in the world right now with mental health services, with telehealth, it really is provided in so many different ways, right? It's provided, sometimes it's by video, sometimes it's by phones. I mean, there's all sorts of different ways. And different people have different preferences for what feels best for them in that very intimate, kind of vulnerable situation. So we would work with the students and our healthcare, our social workers, guidance counselors, would meet the needs of the students the best they could with the tools that we had, depending on the environment that they were in. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. I think one of the things I also want to reiterate, because I know I went through all these slides, but kind of if I had to summarize it for you, I guess what I'd say is that we are trying very, very, very hard to make this look as close to what normal would be in a really abnormal time. And so we're not necessarily going to hit this doesn't feel like anything's different target, because that's an unachievable target, right? But our goal is as we speak at each of these levels, elementary, middle school, high school, is to provide as close as possible in the situation that we're in, an experience that can get as close as possible to our regular, normal processes, with the added ability of being able to transform even those regular processes into something bigger and better, taking this opportunity to use technology a different way, so even enhance it. It's hard to, obviously it's hard to do. Things are changing all the time, but that is our goal. Our goal always is to provide that optimal learning experience for our students as normal as possible in a very abnormal time.
Hey, Chris, quick question regarding the technology front for you. I guess it's a twofold question. Number one, where will the Wi-Fi hotspot be, or where will those be in terms of facility? Can you give us a picture of what that will look like? And then also, what would happen if, there's a technology issue, which we know will happen, whether it be a storm or who knows? Will that instruction be recorded then in a asynchronous manner, or, for sure, or how can we get that instruction back if you're the student?
Right,
trying to
so
catch that?
as far as your hotspot question, I know that for students that need internet access, we are trying to provide as many mobile hotspots as we can that we have available, but those are a hot commodity. We also have the opportunity we have wireless in our buildings. So the technology department will work closely with families that have identified that internet is a difficulty for them. And we will work, it depends on where they live and all sorts of different things, either working with different carriers to get them maybe a discounted rate or support in that way. So that would be something that Roxanne and Ed Hollandoner would work on. As far as disruptions to technology, that was the second part of your question, right?
Correct, yes.
Obviously, that would provide a challenge. And we would need to be, I'm going to use the word nimble again. We would need to be nimble as well, so that anything that our teachers, so let's say, for example, I'm in, I don't know, a biology class, and my teacher has provided a live lecture on the dissection of a frog. I don't know, something. But my power is out that day, right? So I can't access it. That would be, we would want that, we would hope that that would be recorded and available to that student later. Or if I was sick today and I wanted to go back and make it up tomorrow. So that would be the goal. Yes. Does that answer your question?
Sort of. I just hope that instead of hope, it would be recorded as opposed to.
Yes,
we
so we're
hope
still.
it would be recorded. We would want that to be recorded.
Yes, and so we're still working on all the details of that. Mr. Wilder, did you want to speak to that more specifically?
Yeah, the other thing I'll add is that, we would treat that like an absence in school. If a student misses a lecture during school, on a normal day, we typically wouldn't record that, but what we would do is provide the next best, alternative. Maybe it's something that you read, maybe it's a website that you go to see a virtual dissection of a frog or something to that effect. So I'll reiterate something that Dr. Webster said. We're trying to make this as normal as possible. And disruptions like that, unfortunately, you don't know when they're going to happen or timing or anything like that. But our commitment would be the same as it would be under normal circumstances to provide, if we can't provide the recording, then the next best opportunity or a suitable alternative learning activity. So that's what we would do under those circumstances. I also want to go back to the hotspot question. We've got some hotspots in the district already. I think we've got about 10 of them. We had those in the spring. We still have those over the summer. I think I mentioned last time that School Education Foundation, or the Sycamore Education Foundation, is working on a grant with the public library. All of those would be housed in the school district, although they would technically be owned by the public library. So that's going to offer the opportunity to expand the number of hotspots that we can provide. We think that those are going to be housed at the administrative building so that students from anywhere in the district, any school, can contact the district office and make arrangements to have one picked up and then keep that really indefinitely until it's no longer needed. So just want to add that in terms of the hotspot question.
Right. Thank you, Steve.
And the nice thing about technology is I know we tend to, when we think about technology, the first thing we think about is video. But actually, when you look at the Google Classrooms and the rich learning experiences we're providing for our students, whether they're hybrid or fully remote, it really is not 100% dependent on a teacher providing a video. We also have access to a lot of our learning resources, a lot of our instructional resources have videos that come with the resources that are actually through the company that provide, like a Khan Academy, but not, right? So you know how Khan Academy has the pre-recorded videos? A lot of our instructional resources have added blended learning components to their digital resources. So when we speak about, would they have access to a video, those videos would always be accessible to students to go back and look at and review even for tests and things like that. So while our teachers will absolutely be working with our students virtually, when you talk about the recording piece, there are lots of opportunities for that to happen in other ways that can be housed indefinitely for our students to see in multiple types of situations.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Webster.
Sure.
Just a couple questions in regards to, I think we've hinted around it and said it, but didn't specifically say it. And if I'm a parent that's weighing this as an option,
Okay.
If I'm committing to the fully e-learning platform and that's what I want to choose for my child, I'm essentially going to make them available during the school day. I'm going to follow that school schedule. We want them as part of that. I know we talked about video recording and watching that at a later time, but essentially I need to kind of make sure that that's going to work for the schedule, for the family and for the student and all that's involved. Is that correct?
So we're going to try and follow, especially K-8 and probably K-9 or 10, really trying to follow closely the school schedule, regardless of whether you're in our building or you're at home working, to provide that continuity for students, while still providing flexibility. As our students get older, and we try to teach them independence and kind of how to balance things and how to prepare for life outside of high school, that isn't quite so regimented by a bell schedule, that's where we might start to see a little bit more of the, this is how you balance an online class, or this is how you do those things. So I guess to answer your question, the focus this year is going to be a little bit different than it was in the spring, as far as that, whether you're in school or at home, really following, like, this is when I do reading, this is when I do math, this is when I do science, this is when I break for lunch, even when I'm at home, right? This is when I break for lunch. Maybe this is when I go to recess, right? This is when I have my specials, to really follow that routine. And that will be equally important for both our students that are fully online, as well as our students that are hybrid, because the students that are coming alternate days, it helps keep them in a routine. So as they, you know, again, that nimble, right? As they kind of transition back and forth between in-school and out-of-school, the routine is the same.
Sure. And then I guess just a couple other questions is, you had mentioned, and you gave the example of the first grader that normally attends North Grove, choosing this option. They may have a teacher that's normally teaching out of another building, or it's not necessarily the first grade teacher in North Grove. Is that teacher that they're seeing day to day consistent then? So that's their quote unquote their teacher, both the teacher identifies with the student and the student identifies with the teacher then at that point, so that they're growing that relationship?
Yes.
Okay, so that's going to be consistent hopefully throughout the year.
Yes, and I'll let Mr. Wilder expand on that as well, but yes, it would not be a rotating, to my knowledge, it would not be a rotating teacher. It would be a teacher that would be assigned to that classroom. But I will let Mr. Wilder speak maybe more specifically if you have to add.
Yeah, I wouldn't add a whole lot more other than what Dr. Webster said. Yeah, absolutely. We're going to make every effort so that remote teacher is the same for that student for that 9 weeks, that semester, however long. Again, we're going to do our best to make that plan. But as circumstances change, we'll have to be kind of flexible and nimble, but we recognize that consistency is the best. So staffing needs may change as the year goes on, and I can think of a couple of different examples where we've had to change instructors in mid-year for whatever reason. Those things will happen, but by and large, we're going to assign a teacher so that it's that, first grade teacher, for example, for that consistency for the students. Yeah.
And again, that really will depend on the number of students. We won't really know for sure how that's going to look until we know the students that we have.
Sure.
And the numbers at each buildings. I mean, it may very well be that if you're a first grader at North Grove, that you have a first grade North Grove. I mean, there's really just no way to know at this point until we kind of know what the enrollment's going to look like.
Sure. But then I guess to expand on that a little bit further, it's not going to be the parent, or it's not going to be the teacher that's actually in the classroom. So if I am someone who decides, hey, look, after 9 weeks, I want to go to the hybrid model, I'm going to be assigned into a classroom, that teacher is going to be new to me now.
That is.
As well as the teacher is going to be, that's a brand new student to them, coming in mid-year or whatever that is.
Yes, that is a potential.
Okay.
And that's a likelihood, actually.
Sure.
Is there, just to piggyback on that, don't mean to interrupt.
No.
Sure.
I assume there's a certain cutoff that no more students can join that classroom, or perhaps the first grade classrooms at Southeast for social distancing reasons. So families that choose in the second 9 weeks to join in this hybrid model, will they possibly end up at not their neighborhood school?
Oh, you mean like for overflow?
Yeah.
I have not been part of that conversation. Could you help answer that? I'm not sure, I've not.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. We're going to do our best to make sure that they get to their home district, but we also have some other issues that we need to follow, some other guidelines. So there's potential that if they remote learn for the first 9 weeks, and I'll use my son as an example, he's going to be a fifth grader. If he did that for the first 9 weeks and then went back after the second, starting the second 9 weeks, we may have to move him to a classroom at another school just because of space and safety and some of those other issues, yeah.
Okay.
That's a good question.
Makes sense.
Dr. Webster, a couple questions.
Sure.
I was looking for a little more direction or detail on what we aren't doing with specials like music, art, those types of things, as far as directions for teachers and as well as PE. Like example, I know we're going to be on an A-B type schedule, but can they use a fitness center? What are the requirements as far as who's going to clean that between classes? Is it the teacher? Is it the staff? Are they supposed to be, obviously PE likely would be outside, but when you have bad weather or when we approach winter, how are we addressing those things? What can and can't they do in that setting as well as, you know, it's going to be hard to play an instrument with a mask on. So how are we doing those types of things? A little
I will
more
actually
detail or
let-
direction on that for teachers?
Yes, I will let Mark respond to that, Mr. Ekstrom, because that's really more of his area as far as the facility. When you're talking about the disinfecting and the social distancing in the spaces, he would actually have more information specifically about those things.
And I'll jump in. Mark will talk a little bit more about the cleaning and the disinfecting and how that's going to be handled. But from a curriculum standpoint, all of those specials, PE electives, all of those are going to be part of the daily schedule. They're going to look different, you know, so, you know, in terms of PE, we want students to be active, but we also want to minimize, so we don't want sweat going everywhere and breathing heavy and that sort of thing. So all those classes will be part of the daily schedule. How we clean and disinfect, Mark will touch on that here in a little bit. And some of that will be things that staff do, and, you know, custodial staff, maintenance staff, things like that. Part of that is something that we'll ask classroom teachers to do, or students themselves. For example, if they're using the bench press in the weight room, they would just wipe the bench down when they're done, things like that. But all of that's you know, covered under the facilities.
That's an important clarification. Thank you, Mr. Wilder. So I apologize if your initial question is, are we having those things, as opposed to how are we maintaining them? So yes, we will be having, from the curricular standpoint, we will be offering art, music, PE. Again, they may look different, but as far as like the facility piece of it, you know, Mark would be much more knowledgeable about the plans he has. He's been working very hard on that, so thank you for that clarification, Mr. Wilder, in case I misinterpreted that
Yeah,
question.
no problem.
Thanks.
Chris, I know last week we touched on that we're hoping all of our elementary schools have a Chromebook, but there's obviously a lot of need for Chromebooks.
Yes, there is.
So a few parents have actually asked me this week, you know, what's the timetable for that if they choose a remote option but don't have a computer at home? How is that going to work for that family?
Well, as long as we have access to the technology, once they are delivered, then all students will have option to have, they'll have a computer, K-12, whether they're here or they're home, once we receive the delivery of the laptops. Or the Chromebooks, I apologize, they're not laptops, they're Chromebooks.
So do we have a sense for when we'll receive those Chromebooks?
I know that Roxanne has been getting daily updates on that. I would really want to defer to the technology department. I don't want to misspeak on what her most recent contact is or information is on that. I know she's speaking daily. I have not spoken with her directly.
But because there's potential for them to be delayed, we're working on, okay, what if? You know, what will students be doing when they don't have the technology in their hand, or until they have that technology in their hand? And if they have a device at home that would work, obviously that's great, but we'll do our best to work with those students who opt for remote learning until those devices come in, and we can get them set up and get them distributed as quickly as we can.
Yep, that was our next plan. That was the next thing we're going to start planning for.
I was gonna say, hopefully that's a complete and accurate answer as far as if the students already have technology, will our online curriculum be deliverable via the technology they already have, or will they be required to do it via a school-issued Chromebook? And if the prior, can families then let you know in some way, hey, we don't need a device, prioritize getting these to those families that do first?
Yeah, absolutely, I guess yes and yes. There's nothing, off the top of my head, so there's nothing that we are delivering instruction through that would be, they should be device agnostic.
Okay.
So it does not necessarily need to be through a Chromebook. I can't speak to every single thing that we use, because I don't want to misspeak. I can't, off the top of my head, I can't think of anything that would not be device agnostic. I know sometimes it looks a little bit different on a Mac than on a PC type of thing. I'm a Mac person, so I kind of bump into that sometimes, so I understand that. But they're not having a Chromebook if they choose, if they prefer. If they have a nicer computer at home and they don't want to use the Chromebook, and they say, I don't need this school-issue Chromebook, and it works for them, that would be an option as well. But I
assume
don't.
there just may be some limit then to how much the school can help them figure out their own device.
That
As
would
an
be
owner
the
of an
issue.
HP calculator, I get that scenario quite often.
The other issue, though, the one thing that we would really, that I probably want to make sure that I'm not misspeaking about, so while they are device agnostic, the issue we run into when students use non-school issued Chromebooks is the filter.
Sure.
So, and that proved to be kind of tricky, to be honest with you, in the spring, because we don't know what type of filters or filters they don't have on their computers. And when we're viewing something through our district filters and creating things from our district filters, We see how it looks from a district computer, but when it's viewed from a computer at home, we don't have any control over what that may or may not look like. We also don't have as much control over what kids can or can't see. So my belief is that I would, and I could be misspeaking, so please correct me if you think I'm wrong, Mr. Wilder, but I believe the technology department would be very, very strongly advocating that students need to use a school Chromebook for safety purposes, for online safety. We know that we have things in place that don't compromise students' privacy or provide filters so they don't end up at websites that you might not want them at.
I'd probably recommend, and maybe Roxanne's already thought about this, but if we are going to provide parents that option, then maybe providing them as early as possible a disclaimer that says, here are the things that you're accepting as far as a liability for what your children may or may not see on their own device,
Yeah.
as well as here are the requirements that device must, be able to meet to access the full curriculum. And
Yeah,
that way
because
parents at least will
it
be
does get
informed.
pretty tricky. When, we also have, as part of our, on our Chromebooks, we also have, we know if students are saying or doing things that may be unsafe as far as their social emotional health. I know Julene was asking about that earlier.
Sure.
That can kind of help us make sure that our kids are okay. So I think that we would want to be very, very, very careful about encouraging them to use non-district technology.
I understand. This is particularly from the motivation of making sure that every student can start learning on day one and not be limited by
Yes.
an access to device because we've ordered them months ago and they just haven't arrived.
So to answer your initial question, is it possible? Yes. I believe that everything we're doing is device agnostic, but we would want to be very intentional in how we chose that for the safety purposes, to keep our kids safe.
Understood.
On the internet.
Is there a goal for how much of the day should be live teaching, synchronous teaching?
There has not been a goal set specifically for that.
The guidance from ISB is 5 instructional hours, but the most recent guidance that I've seen is that they're recommending, not necessarily requiring, but recommending that half of that be live or engaged. For example, like under the hybrid, if they're in person, at least half of that, 2.5 hours is in person, but the other half could happen outside of school, doing activities outside of school, PE, for example. So the guidance is 5 instructional hours, but it could be partly in and partly out. And for remote, it's 5 hours still is the recommendation, but that doesn't necessarily mean 5 hours straight of instruction. Part of that's going to be instruction and then time to complete activities and things like that, just like they would be doing in the classroom.
And so to clarify just a little bit, so to compare it to what it looked like in the spring, right? So as a comparison, it'll be a lot more teacher engagement, especially at K-5 because of the access to technology. Not that the teachers were disengaged, but just the opportunity for teachers to engage. So it wasn't that teachers weren't engaged, it's the greater opportunity for them to engage. So what we're trying to do is really use this to balance connection, right? So human connection is the number one most important thing outside of safety. But I mean, once you get past that, in an education setting, learning doesn't happen outside of human connections. But human connections can be formed, in multiple ways, but they can't be formed if there's not live dialogue of some sort. So we're working really hard to balance that live connection, that human connection time, also with screen time, right? Because we also want to make sure that there's a balance between having kids up and doing things as well, right? Having different activities, doing things that may not necessarily involve being specifically on the computer. So the guidance from ISB is a minimum of 5 hours a day of education. And that can look a variety of ways, and it'll vary on different days too. And when we have the live instruction, the goal for that, to kind of elaborate more specifically to answer your question, is not necessarily always going to be strictly just teacher delivered. It could be teachers working with small groups. It could be teachers contacting, working with kids that have a question, right, that are struggling with their homework, or different ways. So there are lots of different ways that live connection could work. But as far as saying specifically there has to be X amount of time, we will absolutely have expectations of what a typical day will look like and what the engagement between teachers and students will look like. But as far as saying it needs to be exactly this many minutes of this and this many minutes of that, I think it will vary. There will be connection every day. Teachers will be in contact with students every single day in some way. They will make that connection every day. But just like in the classroom, every day is going to be a little bit different, and it's going to be based on what kids need and where they're at in that particular lesson or unit or moment in time.
So I participated in a Zoom call with Representative Underwood last night.
Oh, cool.
She was, her focus was really just to hear from, there were 16 different school districts on the call. It was really to hear from them what their plan was, and then to ask them where they needed help and where they needed resources. And some districts, and I'll grant you they were smaller districts than ours, but they actually are offering an in-school model and a remote model. But with the teacher, your teacher teaching, and you're at home and you're viewing the day on your computer, while that teacher's teaching math in your classroom, you're with your class learning. And I've asked Mr. Wilder about this a few times in emails. Why can't it look like that to more replicate a normal school day?
Like a live stream?
And I hear that, I sense that there's roadblocks. Can you talk about that a little bit without getting too technology heavy? Because I realize that's not your place, but just why that's a struggle for our district?
So the live stream, one aspect of the difficulty of that could be the technology. It could be the hardware, right? It could be actually having the cameras and the microphones and all of the different things that you would need to be able to have that back and forth, especially if you wanted it to be back and forth. It's one thing even if you're just streaming it directly, like we are tonight, right? So we are literally just streaming directly to whoever's watching tonight, but it's not a Zoom call, right? So it's not a dialogue. So if you add that component in as well, where we're actually having a conversation like you would in Zoom, that's a whole other level. So I am not the technology expert. I'm tech savvy as a tech user. I am not very tech savvy when it comes to that kinds of things. So that would really be a better Roxanne question. But that would be one of the barriers would be to equip each classroom. And to that would be a pretty large task.
Chris, if I could expand on that, one other obvious, and maybe they've thought about it, one other obvious technology limitation when you talk about trying to do that is just the sheer number of independent classrooms we have and trying to provide enough total bandwidth, enough total lanes of traffic for all of those classrooms to be streaming outside of the school's, one internet connection would definitely be a technological limitation that would be kind of the first one to check off. So it's possible we just don't have the capacity to do that. Whereas a teacher recording a video that then gets uploaded to YouTube, for example, can now be streamed from Google servers. It's not impacting the school's resources at that point, if that makes sense.
And we're going to have, because our students will have computers, it won't be just the teacher that would be streaming, and that it would be the students in the classroom. In addition to Eric's point with the bandwidth, it isn't even just the teachers that would be using that bandwidth to stream. The kids are going to be doing different activities using bandwidth as well.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
If, as we progress into parents making this decision in the coming week or so, if they have specific questions that maybe relate to their family or more detailed questions, are we going to offer a resource for that, like an email or somebody in particular where they could come or they call and maybe get a little bit more deep dive into something in particular that they need that maybe we're not asking here tonight?
Currently, the superintendent's office is fielding those questions. Is that, I don't want to.
We are. She's not passing the buck. That's true. We are.
Cell phone?
My cell phone number is, no. I would encourage any parent to contact the district office, the admin building, to ask questions like that. They can also call their local school building. Some questions may be specific to what happens at the elementary level or the middle school, but they're always welcome to contact the district office. And I hadn't thought about and just a kind of a set-aside email address for something like that. Hybrid questions, whatever, but we can, I'll certainly talk to Ed and Roxanne in the morning and see if that's something we can set up. It's a good idea.
Yeah, the nice thing about having them call central office, call the district office, is they don't always know who they should ask the question to, right? And so it kind of saves them from having to look at the website and I don't know, who do I call, right? So if they call the main number, then Mrs. Sloniker kind of goes through or Mr. Wilder and looks at, oh, that's a Chris question, oh, that's a Roxanne question, or that should go to the building. And then we can kind of help direct, or this is a superintendent question, right? And then we can kind of direct the person to where they need to go for the answer, so they're not kind of searching for, I don't know who to talk to, right? So they can get their answer quickly and get responded to quickly. It kind of helps us kind of triage where the questions go.
Well, I'd hope that we would also develop a frequently asked questions section for our website, so that as these questions come up, perhaps we could answer them and put them on the website so that other people that might have the same questions can look there for an answer.
Yes, David is working on that, and so is Lynn Riley. So Lynn is looking at creating one for special ed specifically, and then David Olson is also working on one for the more general FAQs. That's in process.
The idea of equity comes to mind, and I don't mean to jump back into PE again, but it just came to my mind was when we've got a middle school and high school where we have several different teachers teaching sections on the A or the B day, but probably more so when we have 5 elementaries. Is there going to be some uniformity so we don't have, well, my kid's doing these activities at North School and over at Southeast that won't let them do that? Do we have, are we going to have any discussions about some uniformity so we don't run into that inequity? We had to deal with that with playgrounds in years past and kind of made them more uniform.
Absolutely.
Wondering how that would work in a scenario like that.
And that's going to actually be important for PE and for every content area. That's a broader thing, and the wonderful thing about that is what we have PLCs for. That is the purpose of PLC, so that that professional learning community, so that our teachers collaborate and plan, so they provide a consistent experience. Obviously, they bring their art and craft to teaching, so it's not going to be lockstep. Everything's going to look exactly the same, but the experience, the end experience, and the knowledge will be the same. I will say, so that's more broadly to answer your question. That's why the PLC model, that culture that we have here of PLC is so incredibly important, because especially in a time like this, because that's what provides that continuity and that consistency and that collaboration. But to speak specifically to PE, just because I know that's where you initially started, they did a really fantastic job last spring doing exactly that, so that every student at elementary had the same PE experiences at the middle school, at the high school. They really, to speak specifically to PE, they really did a fantastic job. All the specials, music, art, they really followed the PLC model. They met every week, and they created the learning experiences for students across the week, across grade levels, so that everybody had the same experience. It wasn't by building, it was by grade level. So again, that is the power of PLC. And so that is something that we will definitely lean into heavily during this time to provide that consistency for our students. But I just wanted to give a shout out to the PE teachers specifically. All our teachers did well, but you asked about PE specifically, so. Art and music did a fantastic job too.
Thanks.
Dr. Webster, if I could take us back 20 minutes to the earlier questions about the online schedule and I guess the rigidness, let's say, of the schedule for the K through 6, 7 grade levels versus the high school. I guess it's not so much a question as much of an ask that while I understand the reasoning for wanting to create that consistency for those younger learners who need maybe more structure put on them. I also want us to acknowledge that those also are the population that has the least amount of control over their day.
Right.
And so where we may say you need to be online from 2:15 to 3:15 for your online time with your teacher, that may be when parent A is driving student to parent B's house or picking up from daycare or whatever it may be that's completely out of those kids' control. So I would just ask, there needs to be some amount of flexibility in those online/hybrid online days to allow those children who have no control over their schedule to still meet whatever the requirements are to get their content done. Acknowledging that certainly the teachers can't be available 14 hours a day to accommodate every situation, but to the extent that they can meet all of their educational requirements and get the work done and turned in, that they have the flexibility to do that.
I would agree with you completely on that. It's a balance for sure, but I would like to add just even a little bit to what you said, because there are students that thrived in the not necessarily 8 to 8:30 is this, 9 to 9:30 is this. We had students that actually did better in that environment, and so we wouldn't want to necessarily have it's all about balance, right? So you want to have some structure and consistency, but you don't want it to be a one-size-fits-all approach, because my learning style may not match your learning style. And maybe I need that flexibility, not just because my parents aren't around, just because I learn better at 2 o'clock than I do at 10 o'clock, which is not true. I learn better at 10 o'clock than 2 o'clock, but, so finding that balance, Eric, right? So providing some kind of consistency, that kids have some normalcy and some routine, but not so much that it's constraining, right? So finding that balance between consistency and normalcy without it being a constraint. And that's a delicate balance. It's a tricky balance, but I hear you. And 100%, it's not always within a child's control what they have available to them, but maybe it isn't even the time of day that they learn best. So trying to find that balance. But I apologize, I interrupted you.
And then another question I had regarding the middle school and high school start times, which seem really early to me. I don't know how much that differs from the current schedule, since I haven't had any kids get that old yet. But I know that we had a presentation a couple years back, and I think it was when we were talking about the flex mod scheduling with Mr. Carlson. And I feel like I remembered some research saying that it was much better for high school students or adolescents to start their days a bit later, that their peak learning, didn't start until 10 a.m., let's say. So I guess I'm a little surprised to see just how early we're expecting maybe that population of students to get their day started, and would it be possible, or is it wise to consider maybe switching that around and having them come in, if it's a transportation issue, instead of trying to get them in before the elementary kids, having them come in after to accommodate, just how their bodies are changing at that age.
That's a good question. I'll make note of that, and we can discuss that.
Yeah, I had the
further.
same thought when I saw those times.
That's a good question.
I will tell you, a family that contacted me said they would do anything to have their high school student home first, because he's their daycare provider.
That was the other thing, right?
That's a good comment.
That's the issue that often comes up in that situation, is we try to make sure that we have, especially now with kind of the different schedule, is trying to make sure that if there are older children at home that have to support childcare, that they're there when the younger child is there. And that might create an obstacle, but maybe. So it is something that I think we can at least investigate from every aspect of that to see. Maybe, I'm not sure we can do it, but we can certainly consider. Because both Chris and Eric, you both bring up very valid points about that topic.
Dr. Webster, on the, how are we looking with our teachers? It seems to me like there will be a very large learning curve on the technology front to try to embrace this online curriculum piece in terms of professional development. Are you feeling comfortable with where you are on that and where our teachers are? And will they be ready to go come, when the bell's rung in late August?
So we have already started to release online anytime, anywhere learning for our teachers, similar to the anytime, anywhere learning we're trying to provide for our students, that have been created by teachers. Teachers are created for teachers by teachers, by a committee of teachers that we started rolling out last week, that deal with exactly those things, the basics of how to use a computer, what does a lesson look like in a Google Classroom, what is a Canvas, or all sorts of different things. How do you use Bitmoji in your classroom, also to enhance instruction. We're releasing more tomorrow morning. There'll be more hours released tomorrow morning and through Friday, so that we have a solid bank of professional development available to teachers by August 3rd to help them feel prepared for when they return in a couple weeks after that. In addition, as Mr. Wilder spoke about earlier, we have some additional time now, perhaps, if that recommendation does come to fruition, that we do have some additional days at the beginning of the school year then to further develop that. Does that answer your question? You look quizzical.
It does. So it sounds like you're feeling good about it?
I feel good about the work that we've done to get professional development out there. Obviously, the professional development that is available this summer is optional, and it's for teachers to pick and choose which ones make the most sense for them. Some of our novice teachers might want some of the more introductory PD. Some of our more experienced teachers, there's some more advanced PD for them as well. So I can say that I feel very good about the work that our teachers did, supporting their colleagues by creating professional development this summer. I've been watching as it comes in, the comments, because they have to fill out a survey after everything they take. The comments have been overwhelmingly positive so far. But I would, I feel good about the comments that are coming back, but I'd like to step back and see, I always want to look to see what teachers think. I think it's more important, do they feel good about what they're getting? So that's what I've been watching on the surveys is, are they feeling good about what they're getting? Is it helpful? I spoke with, just a little bit ago, a teacher who said that they appreciated the fact that even though they may not be able to use it right now, they know where to find it when they need it. And so that what they're really appreciating about the professional development that we're creating now is that now it's not going away. It's not like they went somewhere and they've got paper somewhere or something. It's actually embedded on the learning and teaching site, internal site, and they can go back anytime and say, how did I do that? How did that work? When they actually go to create whatever it is they're trying to create, they should have that built-in support there. So that's my hope. So I feel good about the work that's been done, and I feel very hopeful that it will be useful for teachers, and the feedback I've gotten so far says that it has.
Okay, thank you.
I'd like to echo Mr. Jacobson's sentiments that that's my biggest concern is that the staff, the teachers, feel ready to engage in this on day one, especially since we may find out on day 0 that we're going to be all online and that's going to be the only resource they have. So making sure that I'm getting the confidence from you, from Mr. Wilder, from the staff using it, that they are prepared day one. And obviously there's limitations. We've got a certain amount of time to get ready to radically change the way things are going. But as long as everyone feels confident that they at least are going to be able to deliver what we need to get that stuff done is good. Makes me feel good about it, and I hope you'll continue to provide us updates as we get closer. And I was really glad to hear that we've got that extra 3 days, because in talking to staff, it sounded like that was going to be time much needed. And if I'd known about that last week, I probably wouldn't have recommended not delaying the calendar. So I'm glad I had those conversations. I'm glad people reached out, and I'm glad to hear that that was implemented as a recommendation. Transitioning maybe from professional development to, I don't know what you'd call it, non-professional development. My biggest concern as a parent of a young kid is my ability to supervise their work, to help make sure that they are engaged at home, that they're doing what they're supposed to be. And I guess that's where my biggest concern with something like Google Classroom comes in, as I have not seen in my experience with it a good way, a parent portal or any way for me to say, here's how my child's progressing, other than maybe waiting for quarterly grades or feedback from the teacher. And that's where I heard from several staff members that they had hoped that we would implement some sort of other online curriculum system, maybe something that wasn't, home derived, but something out there professional that might have a built-in parent portal or some other way for kids to really fly and, chug along on their own on some of that stuff. Can you speak a little bit to what the parent's role is, the caretaker's role for those, especially K through 6, K through 8 students, as far as how are they going to be involved in facilitating that learning at home? How much involvement are they going to have? What sort of technology are they going to need to understand to make sure that the kids are getting their work done, able to get it submitted? And is there a reason that we should be considering bringing in some other piece of software or outside service provider to help us with that, as opposed to trying to rely on Google Classroom?
I'll answer the first parts of those questions, but then I have a clarifying question for you.
Okay.
So to kind of go back to your initial question, so with Google Classroom, we used it, we did use it K-5 last year, but we were limited in our use of it last year because we were not one-to-one. There are opportunities to invite guardians to the Google Classroom so that they're more aware. I think you're asking more specifically about grades. Is that what you're asking? Or work completion? Is that more?
No, I'm really just trying to understand, especially with how stretched I think teacher resources are going to be just handling the fact that some students are remote and online. It seems to me there's going to be less of an opportunity maybe for parents to interact directly with the teachers to be able to understand, oh, my child's struggling in this. You don't have the time maybe, given the constraints, to work with them on that skill. How am I going to know what they're struggling on? How am I going to know if they're a day or two behind in getting work submitted? How am I going to know when they come to me at 10 o'clock and say, I've got everything done, can I go video game now, that they haven't left out a huge part of the day that I, that I couldn't help supervise and make sure that they were getting, everything checked off that they were supposed to. I'm just concerned about those roles as parents, and that's for a parent who wants to be actively engaged. I fear even more for those parents who maybe aren't, and how we're going to keep those kids accountable while they're away.
Well, I think it's going to actually look very similar to even if they're in school, because if they're in school, you're going to have those same questions. I mean, I have a deeper answer to that too, but I think there's a lot of parallels between online and in school. When I was raising my kids and I would ask them after dinner, are you sure that's the only homework you had before you go play video games? Are you sure you're done? And they were completely, my 26-year-old definitely didn't have computers in school, which seems hilarious to me that she's old at 26. But, so I think there's a lot of parallels there as far as, work completion, are we staying on top of things? And that communication will be the same as it always has been. It may be through a different format, but the teachers will still be communicating with parents as they would have in a traditional setting, and probably actually have more opportunities to communicate than they did previously through Google Classroom or through, video chat. I mean, even having a Google Meet. I mean, I think that there might actually be more opportunities for teachers to be in contact with parents, more flexible opportunities for teachers to be in contact with parents. As far as the question of what is my responsibility going to be kind of on the off days when my kids are in school, I think was also.
Right, or every day if we end up having to go online only.
Right. So in an online environment, how about that? So in an online environment, kind of what do we foresee? So in the hybrid model, the nice thing about the hybrid model is that they're still with us 2 or 3 days a week. And so we can speak with them, work with them on the days that we're there. But part of the reason for this arrival and dismissal schedule that we have is that we have time built in every day for our teachers to check in with the students that are on their off day. Whether it's, if I'm an A student, today's Monday, and I'm in school, when I leave at whatever time I leave, depending on my schedule, the reason we have that time built in the afternoon is so that we can check in, our teachers can check in both with their students that are learning remotely fully online, or for our students that if I'm a teacher, my B students. So today I had Chris, she's an A student, Steve's a B student, so I had Chris all day, so now I can check in with, my B students. We're also gonna have time in the morning where they check in, especially at the elementary level, to kind of get their day started, like a morning meeting type of thing is our plan. But there's definitely time built in at the end of the day for exactly that purpose, for being able to touch base with kids, to answer any questions as they worked at home that day. Their day at home will be completed, and they will be able to say, you know what, Mrs. Webster, I got stuck. I didn't know how to do that math problem. Can you help me with that math problem? So we'll have that built in every day. As far as what parent engagement, obviously we love when our parents are engaged with their students' learning. We know that that's not always possible depending on their work schedule that day or what their other commitments are. But our goal in addition to having that daily check-in with whoever is not with us in person that day, our goal would be to make sure that we provide that really primary instruction when we have the students with us, for those that are in the hybrid model, so that they have the support and scaffolding they need to be a little bit more independent on the days that they're not with a teacher. Does that answer your question? Now that, in the case of a fully online, Eric, I know that won't be the case because they won't be there on a Monday or a Wednesday or a Tuesday or Thursday. But then we would build in different ways for the teachers to work. They could be working with each of their kids that day because there's no social distancing when the whole class is.
I think I don't know that it completely satisfies my concern just about what that experience is going to look like, especially for those parents who I know have the same concerns. If I'm going to take on the responsibility, either because I think that I'm going to be able to homeschool better than the hybrid, or because I'm concerned for a health reason, I think it would be helpful in the next week or two if we could put together just maybe a mock video on the website that says, if you're an at-home, educator for your students, here's kind of what your role would look like. Here's what that online experience looks like. I think that's the biggest question in people's mind is, what does it mean to be an online education in this environment? Because they may have experience with it, but every school does it a little differently. I've done programs through Kaplan and Dalton and a bunch of other, online platforms, and they're all going to look very different. So what does ours look like? And I think that would help people.
And I think that people have a lot of questions too, Eric, because it's not going to look the same as it did in the spring. It's going to be much better than it was in the spring. I mean, in my opinion, we did a very good job in the situation that we were in a snap. I have nothing but positive things to say about all the work our teachers did last spring, but it was less than ideal, and it wasn't because of anything anybody did or didn't do. It was just a situation we were in. And I think the questions I've gotten are a little bit of fear that it's going to just be that replicated, and it's not. It's going to be very different than the spring.
Right.
And I think
I'm just hoping that we can provide them with a more concrete example than just it'll be better. So and that doesn't mean they have to watch, a whole bio class or a whole English class, but if we could just show a sample, here's what here's 5 minutes of what an hour-long or half-hour-long lecture on a topic might look like for the student, and here's an example of what sort of activities they might be engaged in, and even if that's taking bits and pieces from the choice boards, and whatever that's going to look like. I mean, I'm talking because I have no idea what it's going to look like. I think those sorts of things, the more we can get out to parents, the easier it's going to be for them to make that critical decision.
That's a great idea. I can talk to Mr. Wilder tomorrow and work with Mr. Olson, with David, and see if there's some type of parent communication piece we can include with that.
You know, it's almost as if you could cover that in the form of, you know, some type of, whether it be a Zoom meeting, and that's probably the last thing that anyone wants to attend, right?
Another Zoom meeting.
But getting the word out to parents just about the platform, you could have some type of set time and meeting where it's like, this is the platform that we're using, this is how to navigate it, and then that would allow some time for a Q&A or something.
We did send, on the survey that we sent to parents, we did ask them what their interest level was in kind of parent and professional development. There were very specific questions. And to be honest, there wasn't a huge interest in it, but there was interest. So I think that it would be a very good thing to consider to add to our website. But that could be a great part of our FAQs even, right? Just
Or you can use it as a way to teach the FAQs. I mean, put together a mock class that's answering these questions about reopening with a short quiz afterward.
Like a little tutorial.
Right.
8-minute thing or something like that.
Yeah.
That's a great idea.
That's a good idea.
That's a very great idea. So we'll talk to, I'll let Mr. Wilder speak with Mr. Olson, and we can work together on that.
Yeah.
David and I have been working together on a lot of things lately. So
And I love the communication, and of late, it's been really good, so thank you.
kudos to David.
One other question about
principal.
that online experience, if I may. For the asynchronous portions of the day, is there an expectation as to when a teacher, and it may not be that student's teacher, but if a student asks a question, hey, I struggled with this math concept or whatnot, is there an expectation on how quickly they can expect a response? And it's either during these, if a message is sent by this time of the day, it'll be responded to by the end of today, by 5 o'clock today, or we'll respond to all questions within 24 hours. I think people are going to need to understand what that expectation is as well.
So obviously the goal would be to answer it during that afternoon. So like if I'm a B student and it's Monday and I have a question about my homework, when that time after my A students leave, my time then can be, part of my time in the afternoon is to answer those B people's questions, right? To respond, to contact, say, how are you doing today? Those types of things, that would be the goal. The goal would be to answer those questions during our check-in time with whichever group of students isn't there during that part of the day. Obviously, if it's, that would be the goal. If it was a hybrid student, we would also see them the next day. And so, the teacher could always respond and say, okay, you know what, well, let's talk about this tomorrow morning during something, right? During silent reading time. Let's have some time to work together to talk about this. If it's someone who's fully remote, then they would take a different approach, right? Then they would set up a time, they would either answer it right then, or they would send supporting instruction to help them. So, but the goal would be, depending on when the teacher got the request, obviously it would have to be before, I would say by the end of the school day, so they would even know. And it would also depend on the number of requests that, that the teacher could physically get to. I don't anticipate that would be a huge issue, but
right now, there's no expectation that we would either have staff dedicated to answering questions throughout the day up until, let's say, 7 or 8 o'clock at night. Right now, the expectation is regular school
Yes.
hours, that's when
Yes.
you'll get a response. Anything after
would be the next
2:30,
day.
3 o'clock, you're not going to get until the next day.
At this point, we are, just like we would do in a school year, that would be the same thing. It would be during regular school hours. If you had a question for your teacher, in January of last year when we were still fully in person at 5 or 6 o'clock at night, I mean, you could send them an email. Some teachers do answer them, but that would not be an expectation of our teachers, that they would make themselves available outside of school hours.
Okay.
I know a number of parents raised concerns about, with reduced instructional time, whether we really could deliver the full curriculum. And that really was for all grade levels, but in particular, some of the higher level courses at the high school, advanced science, math, English type courses.
So my response to that would be that we are also very cognizant of that. And so that is, again, we're going to go back to the PLC. So in the PLC culture in our district, we identify what they're called essential standards. Those are things that kids absolutely positively have to know and master by the end of that grade level, that course, that unit. Typically, it's by the end of the year of the course, in order to be successful in the course that comes later. So those are really, usually they're 3 to 6, really, really key focuses for that grade level. So we will start there, and we will make sure that we definitely, absolutely build in, we start with the essentials, but we would do that even in school. So again, this is just another time when that process is going to be more crucial, right? So even in a regular setting, we always start with what are the essential understandings, what do kids need to know and be able to do before they leave here and move on to the next, whatever next that is. Constantly assessing that throughout the year. So those are things that'll be even more crucial now. And then there's that secondary level of, once we've gotten these absolutely positively have to have, then there's that second level of, these are really important too. So you kind of have to prioritize what are the things that are the most important for a student to be successful, to move, to be at grade level and to move forward. And so that's what we'll be focusing our instruction on. Obviously, no one knows for sure. I wish I had a crystal ball, but my initial feeling at this point, and I know that you don't want to hear what my feeling is right now, but it's best I got for you, is that with the smaller class sizes, I just think that we are going to have so much more in-depth personal instruction that we're going to be able to really meet kids' needs and get that deep understanding. And I think that I don't have any doubt that we'll be able to cover the core pieces that kids need to be successful in the next course or grade level. It's just going to look different in how we do it, and I do think with the smaller class sizes with the hybrid model, that'll be even more attainable. Did that answer your question?
Yes. Yes. I just wondered how this is going to affect our ability to perform our ongoing assessments that we have for students, our MAP program. Are we going to be able to utilize that still with this kind of a modified system?
I actually think it's going to be more crucial even than it was in the past. Because we have a quasi-baseline from January of last year to at least know kind of where our kids left off. We didn't test in the spring, but we kind of know where they were in January. I actually have a webinar with MAP the next week or two to talk specifically about that. We're going to really that data will be really important for us to help us figure out kind of where kids are starting the year. It'll be one piece of data, and to help identify and to compare that kind of where they were when they left us so that we know. So I'm not sure where the state will be as far as the state assessments that are required, but that's okay. If we don't take those, that's fine.
Right.
But our district benchmark assessments will be incredibly important, both the common assessments that our teachers create and that's MAP particularly, right? To help us kind of get that standardized view of where our kids are, but also making sure that we don't spend a lot of our instructional time on assessment either, especially if we have our in-person time. Looking a little bit different. So finding that balance between choosing the assessments that are going to give us the information we need and not taking valuable instructional time for them. MAP does fit that, in my opinion. We have not talked about that, though, as far as scheduling or when that's going to look or how that's going to look. We haven't gotten to that point yet, when exactly that will take place. We haven't made those plans yet, but there will definitely be an assessment of where our students are starting the school year, and it will be benchmarked 3 times a year, as it has been, providing that MAP is actually offering remote testing this year, which is new. They did not, that's in response to, obviously, the situation, yeah. So I'm going to get more information about that as well. So I will have more to report in a couple weeks.
Well, that's good. That's good to hear because it's served us well over the years, and I'd hate to see that interrupted, that linear study for each student. So.
They also renormed this year, so we'll have to see. There's going to be all sorts of interesting things. I can give you an update on that after I go to that webinar.
Yeah, you have a few other things to take care of right now.
Any other questions? I know you really, I want to make sure that you feel like any detailed questions you have, that you have the answers to the best of our ability at this time. I really want you to feel like you have a good sense of where things are going. So if there's any other questions I can answer for you that I have the answers for, I'm happy to do that so that you feel that some of those gaps are closed that you felt may have been there last week. I want to make sure you feel you have the information you need that we can provide in this very fluid time.
I believe so. I think we're in a much better space than we were last week. So I appreciate the detail and maybe the fleshing out of the program a little bit.
Excellent. And so now, then, if there are no further questions, without further ado, I will happily pass the torch to Mr. Ekstrom.
And I'm sure there will be more questions as we go along, you know, and as things develop. So it's not, I think we just have to say that we're committed to this and we're committed in this direction, but that nothing is absolutely positively carved in stone.
Nope.
We're going to have to be a little bit flexible depending on needs and circumstances.
We appreciate that because it is fluid. Sometimes things change 2 or 3 times in a day. And so we will definitely keep the board updated, especially from the learning and teaching perspective. I will definitely keep you updated as things change. And I appreciate you allowing the grace for that flexibility so that we can meet the needs of our kids with things that are changing all the time. So Mr. Ekstrom, it's all yours.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Good to see everyone again here tonight. I just have a couple updates on my side there for you. So again, you know, just that we're just bringing up that we will have the mask are required and coming through. If it changes, we'll let you guys know. The classroom cleaning, that's a big one. You'll see when we take a look at, you know, when we look at the guidelines from IDPH that, you know, we can use the fitness rooms. We are currently using the fitness rooms here at the high school. With the athletic departments, like kids will be cleaning, you know, they clean equipment upstairs right there. We have switched to Virex for them to clean that, so it's got a faster kill time in between the units. And so the kids are up there right now weightlifting, and they do clean it. The thing is, they do have to have on their mask when they are up there weightlifting. If you heard on the news this morning, several of our area local gyms are doing the same thing, that they're requiring mask on when you come in and through for that safety as it goes in there. The one that we do have to keep on working on, that, you know, we have the distance and everything, is how to work with band and choir. And that's something that Steve Wild and I will have to talk about with Scott Mertens there. He's been providing us information from research out of Colorado there to see what we can do to keep our students safe in those areas. If you look at the guidelines from IDPH, they really recommend that you no singing, you know, and that if they do, they have to be outside. I have got some protective devices for them that are plexiglass so that they can stay 10 feet away and have plexiglass in front of the conductors for the teachers to keep the teachers safe in that aspect. But we'll have to look at more what that looks like, working with Steve up there on how the curriculum will look like for band and for choir. As you know, orchestra is not as, because there's no wind being blown out of there, orchestra is a safer one. When we take a look at that, again, I have how many we can fit in those classrooms there with the 6-foot mark there. But we'll be looking at that research out of Colorado there for that part. Again, you know, that daily disinfectant cleaning is what we're definitely looking at. You know, we have a daily cleaning that we'll do along with daily disinfection and coming through for that, again, through the common areas throughout the day. High school, with the classes changing, again, we require, you know, be working with those teachers to really wipe down those desks inside there and coming in. Teachers will not be required to sweep floors, mop floors, anything like that, the custodian staff is. But those quick desks where the students are sitting at, we do have the material for them where they can spray it down and then do a quick wipe down for the next students to come into those rooms, is what we're hoping that they'll be able to do for us so that we can have that be a success here at the high school level. I know middle school is looking at having the teachers rotate theirs, and so the kids will be in that classroom all day and the teachers just do the rotation as they come through. We've always had different cleaning supplies available to the staff all the way through. I mean, the kids at the elementary, they would wipe down their stations during flu season. You know, we had the wipes in there and they would wipe that down at the end of the day just to try to help keep the flu down from my elementary years as being the principal there. Again, we're just trying to have more on, you know, teachers and with my custodial staff at night doing that disinfecting. And again, you remember there's not a whole lot of sharing of stuff anymore going on. And so it's the students' own stuff going into the students' own bins. And that's what's going to help prevent that sharing kind of going back and forth. If you look at the guidelines for PE, they really, no sharing of equipment, you know, so that's the hardest part. And so they will have to adapt on how to make that work for them with lower numbers, though, with them coming in, that, you know, they'll have plenty of room in a gym when they do go inside, that they'll still be able to do activities inside the gymnasiums as well when we give them the numbers that we did for inside those locations. You know, like I gave, the high school's got their numbers. I went and put in effect, like for the dance studio, no, it can hold more than what I told them, but when they're dancing, you can't have all those ones, you know, they have to be, so I gave them, you know, smaller size so that they can do the activity that they need to do for dance. The gymnasium can hold a lot more than 50, but 50 is the maximum that we can have inside the gymnasium. So we'll have plenty of room inside the gymnasium, and the field house can be broken down with 30 foots in between. They have that recommendation there as well, so to keep them safe inside for those parts. The big one with lunch, as you got to see with the schedule there, that we really wanted to have elementary have lunch for those kids to be able to have in there, and we were able to have the cafeterias be used now with what the guidance is from the CDC and from our county health department there. So the elementaries will have a lunch. They'll be down inside the cafeteria is where they will be at then for that part, and having in, we're working on keeping them 6 feet apart down there. Again, that they'll have a chance then to have that mask off to eat. Once they're done eating, the mask does have to go back on there. We talked today during our district meeting that we had that a lot of hand washing needs to go on though before they eat lunch, so that way don't use the hand sanitizer, use hand washing is the key to helping them keep safe with that part there. And then they're going to be clean and sanitized after each lunch, where we have the lunchroom staff down there be able to clean those tables all up again. We're going to be using that Virex in there again on those tables to get them nice and clean for that next set of students to come in and be ready for their lunch there, instead of eating inside their classrooms and having that kind of be a little bit more of a mess up in that area. And so we figured that was the biggest one that we wanted to make sure you guys saw that. And that the other one is that, after taking a look at what the CDC put out and what they look at for outside recess, the kids need to be outside, and that we are going to allow them to play on the playground equipment. And so that came strong from the CDC to have them outside playing and coming in. Again, they will not be required their face coverings as long as we can keep that social distancing out there. As we talk with elementary, that is going to be awful hard for them. But we will work on that so that the kids can be kids outside, because they definitely need to have that part of their day. And coming in, we will have hand wipes out there for us to wipe down some railings and stuff out there. If we see a kid, with slobbering on, let's say the swing set there, that we can wipe that down, especially for ECE. Those paras will be out there cleaning that in between each of the ones for early childhood. We just put a beautiful facility in over there at Mary Jo Swartz. Worked so hard on getting for the ECE program that those kids will be able to use that out there. Thanks to our para-pros, we'll be able to help do some quick spray downs and have that ready for the next set as well, so that those kids can be out there and play, because the early childhood curriculum is all play based, when we take a look at it, and those kids need to have that so that they have some normalcy with that part. Another one comes up is the ventilation. When we keep on taking a look at, yes, we do have some older buildings around the district. Some of our older buildings actually have some of the better ventilation when we take a look at it because of the air handle units that we have. We will have access to have windows open, doors open as well, to be able to provide that ventilation going through. But the air handlers in each of our buildings, they are providing, cubic feet per minute of fresh air coming into those buildings. I was talking to Bud, our guy from Service Concepts, just talking about wintertime even, that really on our coldest days, we still have fresh air being coming into those buildings. Those dampeners up there do close and open at different rates and having in, but we're still be able to bring in that fresh air in there, and even into our inside rooms. When we take a look at it, our inside rooms have the VAVs then inside there that provide the fresh air that comes back and forth. But what is different in most of our buildings is that we run off chilled water. And so it does not do the same thing as what an air conditioner does. As you know, an air conditioner dehumidifies and coming in and having in. When we use chilled water, we do not have that. We have humid rooms because of that. And so some of our areas in the building, you'll see we have to have dehumidifiers in there to pull that moisture out of the air as it comes through. You have some of that different smell in some of our buildings because that's from the damp air coming in from outside during our hot and humid days out there right now that we're pulling in that. You're not pulling that into your house. The air conditioner is dehumidifying that as part of it. Even in this auditorium here, we actually have the heaters on right now dehumidifying for us. So we have air conditioning going on along with heating going on that's acting as a drying spell so that this isn't so humid inside here. And so they built that, facility for that part in there. So we do have a lot of great fresh air coming into the buildings. And, a lot of parents were wondering, how are we going to do that in some of the areas? But, like our newest buildings, they have some of the biggest VAVs that we've seen, some of the biggest air handlers that we've seen up there that run, that really provide that fresh air exchange for us and having in, and even in the wintertime we'll be able to provide that same fresh air in there as needed inside those classrooms. The other good part is, why we went to the AB schedule, so there's less students in there inside those rooms for capacity as well. If we do have a room that does happen to have, you know, a COVID case in there, we're able to pull the filters out inside those areas, and we'll take a look then to see, do we need to go up to and look at that air handler unit itself and pull the filters inside that air handler itself and pull those filters as well. They're easy access there and do that. So we'll take a look to see what the extent is, but, you know, we can change those classrooms out that night and then be ready for the next day and having that in. If we have to look again, then we can have coils sprayed up there as well if we need to spray the coils. We have Service Concepts that have the material for that. We did spray all the coils. We did a massive cleanup when we had that week because we thought we were going to be coming back. So we changed all the filters. We sprayed every single coil in the district, and we cleaned all the coils in the district to be ready for kids to come back. We were hoping in April there. So we had our buildings ready to go for that truly real deep clean and having in. So we can take a look at situations and have that ability. And we have the product out there, and we have our, you know, Service Concepts along with our maintenance team to be able to do that, to move us forward for the ventilation. That's my main points from after our talk last week, and then from what we're kind of seeing from people, from questions that we're getting. Any questions from me on facilities and grounds?
I have a few.
Yep.
So I'm glad the playgrounds are going to be open. Will they be open just during school day hours? Or for
They are open. They are
neighborhoods?
open right now. So
Okay.
yeah, playgrounds are open. I will tell you, I did not put the basketball, I left basketball hoops up, and, you know, when we saw back in April, we had a lot of parents calling because people were playing like at North Grove Playground basketball out there. But, you know, when I took a look at that, we could have went out and we could have took the nets down, we could have put boards up, but, you know, they were outside. They chose to kind of go there. We did put up on the playground equipment to really get the playground equipment down and having them. Most parents did follow that outside there for that, but they have been open then since July. So when the new rules came out, all that came out there, but we have not been disinfecting anything outside at all. It is just same as the park district, you know, it's open for parents to come and use.
Okay. And can you talk about teacher break rooms or lunch rooms where teachers congregate to eat a meal?
Yeah, so that's going to be where we have to work a little bit because those areas aren't as big as others, so they will have to kind of make some decisions that they may eat in a different location where their teacher's lounge is and coming there, because sometimes they're packed, you know, like Southeast, you know, that one is a packed area, and so they will have to make a choice of where they will go eat their lunch at differently.
But that choice will be theirs?
Yes.
Okay. I don't know that this is your area, Mark, but can you talk about, or could somebody talk about what steps will be followed if a case of COVID is in one of our schools?
I can take that. Nick Reinick actually is taking the lead on that. He had class tonight and couldn't be here, but I've talked with him quite a bit about that. So kind of at the foundational level, we are following CDC, IDPH, and the DeKalb County Health Department guidelines on that. The health department will take the lead in working with us. So when we identify symptoms, even before there's a positive test, when we identify that, we'll isolate that student. Nurse will get involved and help isolate that student, take care of that student, contact parents. We'll ask them to seek out their health care professional, their doctor, whatever the case may be, and let them make a determination in terms of whether or not they need to be tested, what their symptoms are, and in some cases, the diagnosis. What's really challenging is that if you look at the list of COVID symptoms, they're pretty typical symptoms that you would see for a cold, for the flu, you name it. So that's going to be a little bit more challenging for our staff, but that's how we'll react if there are students that show symptoms when they're in school. We'll ask all staff and parents to self-certify that they themselves or their students are symptom-free and ready to come to school. But we also know that with the flu or a cold, those symptoms develop during the day. So when we see those things, that's how we'll react. We'll isolate them, ask them to seek out their doctor, and then let the doctor make a decision about whether or not to continue with testing or whatever the case may be. If, on the other hand, we're notified that a student or a staff member has COVID, so they've sought out a doctor, they've gotten the testing done, that's a different ballgame. So we'll work with the health department. That actually gets reported to the health department. The health department will take care of all the contact tracing. They may need to get in touch with our staff just to get some information about what classes the student was in, what classes the teacher teaches, whatever the case may be. We'll provide information, but they'll actually do the contact tracing for all of the cases in the county, not just schools, but all the cases. They will contact families, adults, whatever the case may be, to let them know that there was contact. Close contact, which is contact within 6 feet for more than 15 minutes. It's an accumulation of 15 minutes. It's not real clear from the health department if that's in a 24-hour period or kind of an eternal 15 minutes, but we've asked that question. We're waiting for feedback on that. But if anybody who's within close contact of that student or that staff member will get contacted by the health department, it's just that person that was in close contact, not the person who was in close contact with that person, if that makes sense. But they'll be contacted so that they can take the steps to seek out their doctor and then talk to them about whether or not they need to get tested or whatever the case may be. So we've got a role in identifying those situations initially. Then we'll work with families as needed, and we'll work with the health department as needed. At some point, 1 or 2 or 5 cases, whatever it may be, depending on the kind of contact that we have, that could lead to the decision to close schools, to close the district. There's no magic number. There's no magic number on 1 case or 10 contacts or whatever the case may be. We have to look at those situations on a case-by-case basis after working with the health department. When they happen, like to say, if and when they happen, then we'll go down that path. And if we start to see that there's a spike, we're going to react very cautiously and close schools or the district if we need to. And you know, several of us have alluded to the possibility that we may be remote learning before this is all said and done beyond our choice. That decision could be made for us, or that decision could be the result of an outbreak, however big or small, within the district that we need to consider and then take action to protect our students and staff. So that's how that process will play out. Once we've gotten final guidance from the health department, then we'll develop a flow chart as well as a list of symptoms and kind of an FAQ in terms of what to look for and things like that, so that we can post on our website and that we can use internally to monitor those situations and act as needed. That's a lot of information. Did I answer your question?
You did, but it leads me to another question. So I suspect that if it's a food service employee in our district or a bus driver or a custodian, somebody that isn't interacting one-on-one with students, that those cases will be handled perhaps a bit differently. I understand that. Will our families be notified that there's been a positive case if one of those people in their school tests positive? So and then that leads me to, I don't know if it was Eric or Jeff that asked about, at that point, if they say, okay, I don't want to be in school anymore, I only want remote because there's these positive cases in my children's school.
Good questions. So the first one is, what kind of communication will the district put out when there's a case, you know, a positive case? We've got a responsibility to inform our community, so we'll live up to that. But we also have to be cautious and respect confidentiality and privacy.
Absolutely.
We also have to be careful in how it's worded, because in some cases there are only a certain number of custodians or bus drivers, or so that information may have to be necessarily vague, but we do need to inform our community if and when that happens. So we'll take care of that. I already drew a blank on the second part of your question.
That's okay. And so then that family decides they don't want their kids in that school any longer.
So that does go back to the earlier question. If a student is in person, opts for hybrid, and there's an outbreak, but school is still open, that's the kind of situation that Dr. Webster alluded to earlier, extenuating circumstances, that we're going to take that into account and do our best to respect that request. We're going to do our best to make that happen, absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I have a couple questions about, I'm sorry, Chris, were you done?
Go right ahead.
you're saying that, whoever wants to answer this, particularly for middle school and high school, you're gonna start school at 7:50 and 7:45. So if I'm a student and I walk in the door, am I allowed to come in at, knowing high school kids, am I allowed to come in at 7:30? And if I am I supposed to wander around, or am I not allowed to come till 7:50, and at that point I have to go directly to period 1 or whatever the plan is? That's number one question. Number two question is, what about transitioning between classes? It's probably more middle school and high school question. Who's patrolling that kids aren't, screwing around and as typical high school or middle school kids would do?
Yeah.
And then what about bathrooms? Kids notoriously have to go to the bathroom every 6 seconds in the
Yeah.
schools.
We know now that's going
How's
to be a
that
spot
gonna
for
be?
mass breaks. I was just talking about right now, I can tell you when walking down elementary when English and writing are going on because how many kids are in the hallways at that time frame. Same kids are out during the writing because they don't want to do it. Guess what? They have to go to the bathroom, pass them in the hallway every day at 2:10. What's going on in class right now? Well, writing. I said, okay, let's go back to class and having in there. So, when we take a look at, the hallways, again, teachers being out in hallways is kind of keep on them going through. We are working on them that, students are going to have to know that the high school, especially, they're A to B, try to, again, half the building in here, it's a little hard to think about what 600 are going to look like in here compared to 1,200. So some of our congestion zones that we know, some of the staff will have to be there to kind of help them kind of keep on moving along. The lockers are not going to be used, so they can't be going to their lockers and having in. The high school does have a good staff of, security staff around, and so they'll be able to let them know to keep moving that part. Bathrooms are going to be needed. Kids need to use those restrooms, and so the high school does many things in the bathrooms now that causes damage, so we'll have to make sure we monitor that. And coming in, we did get new cameras put into the building here that you guys approved last year in the budget. Those are in. We're getting those ready to be up and going, so it gives us a chance to know who's kind of coming in now. Those bathrooms a little bit more so we can figure out some time frames and maybe some of those ones that need to be talked to then by the administration. We talked to today, Steve, about 15, 20 minutes early is what we're opening up our doors for where our times are, so that way they come in. We had the FFA banquet in here last night. One of the seniors talked about that, the chance that her memories are spending her time before school started down in that classroom. That's not going to happen. That's an unfortunate part is that, that you're really going to have to kind of go to your first hour class and coming in. So, my memories of being a high school teacher here, having those kids in the morning in there and after school, that's going to be a little bit harder for them because they need to go to that classroom. Middle school, again, we talked about they're not going to be moving a whole lot, that it's going to be looking more like an elementary, that they're going to come in. You guys built that middle school beautiful, that they have the pods. You have 6th grade all together, 7th grade and 8th grade. So when they come in, again, they won't be using their lockers at that level. They'll go to that homeroom that they're going to have in there. And again, opened up 15 minutes before school starts there, and then go right to those locations.
Thank you.
I guess kind of along those lines, not so much a question, but I think worth saying is we have a tendency to give the students the benefit of the doubt more often than not, to try and make sure we keep them engaged and keep them learning. But I think if you run into a condition at any grade level where a student is just, not wearing the mask or the face shield or whatever, or considering frequently doing that can't be, you go to the ISS room, or I think that has to be a pretty serious offense, and they need to be removed. And the parents are going to have to make an adjustment. And I think that would also go technically for staff. If we have a staff member that chooses not to do something, we have to go through the proper procedures, but it has to be taken very seriously for the safety of all the people there, students and staff, that it can't just be, go down to the ISS room or you go down to the office. That's not going to be the solution, I don't think. I think it has to be, you're going to be removed and you're not going to come back until we get a guarantee, or you're not going to come back until the break or whatever that might be. So I'm not a question, but I'm more throwing that out there.
I would agree with all those things that you said. Those are things that we've talked about internally. And you're right, the students and staff, kind of a different situation, but we'll handle them both appropriately. We have to wear masks and practice social distancing to the best of our ability to minimize the spread. So we'll take those steps if we need to, but absolutely, I agree.
we spent a little bit of time talking about a case breaking out with the staff or with students. Will there be a specific guideline post? I would hope, if I had my way, to the website to say kind of some direction to the parents so that we can understand, or to children in the elementary school. We can understand when we should be sending our kids, when we should be keeping them home, and maybe outlining some specifics there of, if you're a parent and you test positive, and I understand that, deal with this a little bit in my own professional world, people's interaction with other people and how that all goes. There's a million different ways you could come into contact with something, or 6 times removed from something. But I think we need specific guidelines. I would say specifically, if my suggestion would be, someone in my house has it. If someone in my house has directly been exposed to it, so I would be thinking like a parent or a guardian, a grandma that's living with me, whatever, and then specifically my child has been exposed to that at a different level. I mean, I think those are 3 clear things that I would like to see specifically posted on our site for our parents or guardians to be able to go to and say, hey, look, if this happens, okay, here's what I need to do, here's what we don't want, or do we have any plans for that?
Absolutely. That's exactly what our plan is to develop that kind of information so that we can post it on our website, send it out to parents. If you or anybody in your household has these symptoms, you really need to keep your student home, and then contact your health provider to go through the process of, do we need to get screened, do we need to get tested? But that's exactly what we're going to do is give them a list of symptoms. If your child has any of these, don't send them to school. If anybody in your family has these, can consult your doctor or your physician. We're going to err on the side of caution, and that's part of that final guidance that we're waiting for from the health department. But we believe that that's coming soon, and as soon as we've got that, then we can move forward with developing that information, those protocols, so we can provide that to families. It's a really good point.
Mark, well, in the rooms in classrooms that are being socially distanced, will empty desks be removed from those rooms, or will empty desks stay there as kind of a?
Yeah, it's like
Don't
last week,
cross
they're
those
in there,
boundaries.
a lot of the rooms are gonna look the same. It's just that when you come in to see that classroom, then they'll, today there's a 15 there. Tomorrow, the next 15 will be shifted over, and then we'll clean those desks down, because we do not have enough storage areas to be able to pull out just to have 15 desks inside those classrooms that way. So again, the rooms will be set up a lot the same. When we take a look, I was measuring some ones here again at the high school today, and so they are 3 foot apart, those desks, but when you put one here, skip, put the next one, you have 6 feet then in that part there. We do have to work in some locations, though, to try to get them all facing the same direction. And so a lot of the ones here at the high school are kind of kids face this way and this way, so how to put them all kind of pointed forward, 15 of them. Most of the rooms when we look at the high school are 15, 16 limit, because of that, being able to force to that one direction, be able to look at the board that one way, and then put those desks in there. But when you take a look, there'll be about 24, 25 desks inside those classrooms. So we may have to pull 2 or 3 desks out of some of them, and we'll have room for that.
Okay, thank you. I have one more.
Yep.
So I had a teacher contact me, and that teacher and their spouse are both teachers. And they have 2 children in 2 different grades. Their children ride the bus. They're concerned that right there are 5 different communities that they're being exposed to. Mm-hmm. And on the call that I was on with Representative Underwood last night, a lot of districts talked about trying to do cocooning. So keeping a small group of kids that's all they were ever exposed to, rather than these 5 different. Are we aiming to do anything like that? Are we trying to be aware that how many different people that one student is coming in contact with, I guess is my question.
I would say, look at me, I go between 9 different buildings. I can be in 9 different buildings in one day and coming in. So, I go through, I PP up, I have a mask on, I put gloves on when I go into the buildings, and then wash my hands in between each of those. So, when we take a look at that part in there, I mean, you look at my own household, my wife works at her job, I work at this job, and coming through, and I expose my kids to all those different things inside there. Then they go to 3 different buildings, or 2 different buildings, 2 of them here at the high school and 1 at North. So I mean, the cocooning thing, yes, would in reality, but you know, every family is different out there. And coming in, you know, we have families with doctors that are in ERs, and so those kids are exposed to those doctors in there every day, bringing in that. And that's where that, you know, that guidance that we really have is, you know, that quarantine, you know, when we take a look at, I've been exposed to that, and then that's where that e-learning is going to be so crucial, is that, you know, if I get exposed to it, my kids may be part of that, and they automatically become e-learners then at that time online there because of exposure that I've had that then puts them at risk, and we don't want those then to bring that next risk in there. So you know that when there, James, when you take a look at that, you know, we do have documents that we're working on very hard that really are specific in there, and that's what we're just waiting for that final guidance to make sure we have that right. And coming in, it's all typed up. We're just waiting for that from the health department. And you know, when we look at there, it could be, you know, like 14 days out, my kids could be out and coming in. And then if they get it 7 days out, then it's another 14 days out past that, you know. So when you take a look at a kid could be out a month and a half because of those different ones in there when you take a look at those scenarios there and having. So, you know, some of the ones in there, you have to make some decisions, you know, that my children won't be riding the bus, that I will have to figure out a way to get them to sort of take that one limited exposure off of there and bringing that in and having there. But yes, all of our parents come from different roles and different areas and where they're all at and what they're all doing. And so, you know, we try our best to, you know, this PPE is what I'm guaranteeing working my help, you know, to help me stay, you know, healthy. Because I have seen a lot of people since March, you know, I was in all 9 buildings every day, almost kind of going back and forth, gloving up, you know, my hands raw from sanitizer and from washing, and, you know, really trying to keep those guys protected, because I'm talking to my custodians and my maintenance teams, and I don't want to bring anything to them, as because I'm the one that's talking to our outside vendors coming in, all the ones that, you know, we still have repairs that go on that needed to be done, that we have these outside people that are going between districts as well.
So, you know, it's a question asked by a person who works with the public every day.
Yep.
I also, you know, my daughter's hooked me up with this app, How Do You Feel? And one of the questions is always, how many different people did you come in contact with? And some days it's pretty high because I'm in a public space. I'm always happy when it's really low because I think, okay, that cocoon was much smaller that day.
Yeah.
I just wondered.
Yeah, no, good question.
But can I jump on the back of that? Because I think maybe not that specific example because it's a lot of exposure, but there may be little things that can be done. So in regards to like, especially at the elementary level with recess and lunch, will that be consistent? I mean, we're gonna have the same people. I mean, if I'm on an A schedule, I'm there Monday, Wednesday with the rest of the A schedules. I would assume we're keeping it to 50 or less in the lunchroom. Is it going to be consistent with all second grades, all with second grade, or something like that, to where it's that same group of people pretty much every day? And then as it heads out into the playground, the same thing, where it's certain class or whatever that ends up being.
Yeah, no, that they're talking about, that they have the same time frame out there for that. The elementary, especially, we're working on that part. Even the elementary, we're working on that. This is your zone that you get for recess outside. So, you know, when you third grade go out, this is where your area is at to be playing out there, because we have plenty of big backyards for our elementaries when we look at. And so, you know, they're able to go to those locations and having in there, again, for cafeterias, I don't know if they've talked about, you know, having, so for seating will be 6 feet, but I haven't heard them say, you know, will it be assigned seating when they go down there and coming in? Because, you know, right now, when I was elementary principal, you know, kids sat wherever they wanted, but, you know, when we went down there, I can guarantee 90% of the time they were sitting in that same spot. They kind of know that's my location, that's where I go, and that's where I sit and having in, and that's what we'll see, you know, we'll have to talk about that. We'll have to have assigned seating. I hate to see that part, as long as we kept them 6 feet apart. You know, that way they can kind of pick and choose who they get to be by that day and having in there. Again, you know, we're not having it be social hour down there, but they do need to have that social part of the lunch and being able to eat and then have that distance in there so they can have a little bit of conversation, because that is what is crucial to their, you know, social emotional health.
Other questions?
I do have another one. And I'd like to pivot a little bit and maybe talk a little bit more optimistically about where this plan goes down the road. And I understand that you may not have answers for it tonight, and I'm not sure who best to address this question to. But as we look to vote on what this reopening plan looks like on August 24th, I think, what is going to be the schedule by which we continue to reevaluate whether we can move to getting more and more kids in the classroom. And I could read quotes from the American Academy of Pediatrics and the CDC's reopening about the importance of those kids being in school. And we could go through the emails here that were sent in from parents about how impossible this whole situation is going to be, even the first 9 weeks of getting care and of managing all this stuff. So I think ultimately, at least from the stats, 2/3 of our parents want to see kids in all the time. And I know there's a lot of staff that feel that way with some reservations. So my question is, we start off 9 weeks under this proposed hybrid plan. What then is going to be that schedule where we look at it and say, okay, the stats in the county are staying pretty good. We haven't had any outbreaks, or we've had very minimal outbreaks. Now maybe we go from 6 feet of social distancing and 50% of kids in the class to 5 feet or 4 feet of social distancing, and now we can get 75% in. And then another 9 weeks goes by, same sort of situation. Now we can move. And the social distancing guidelines, I understand, range from 3 to 6 feet depending on what organization you look at. So I'm curious to know at what speed we are looking to hopefully reintroduce everybody into the classroom. And maybe that'll be fed by map data as well as really driving that need. But is that something that the administration has considered?
We really haven't talked about a specific timeline for that, but I think that's a really good point. I think right now the goal is to get the school year started, and that first 9 weeks is a really good benchmark, but we'll be evaluating that on a very regular basis just to monitor health data, academic data, how are things going. I think as we approach that 9 weeks, and really that's a perfect time to really kind of take stock in how the first part of the school year has gone. I think we watch our data locally in Sycamore. I think we watch it in the county, but I think we also have to watch it in the state and the regions that the governor's identified. There's less travel during the school year, but every school district is doing things different. So we just have to be cognizant of that. But I would say that evaluation is going to be ongoing, get through the first 9 weeks and maybe even the second 9 weeks, but then really also keeping track of, what's the path look like to developing a vaccine? How long do we think that's out at that point? And just keeping an eye on all of those circumstances to develop a timeline for this is maybe a target date, either to bring students back full or to make a decision about bringing students back full. So I think that's a really good point. Evaluation is going to be ongoing, but that sort of timeline is something that we can develop and maybe not etch that in stone, but try to bring that back next Tuesday as something to discuss with the board.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions? Is there a motion to approve the Return to Learn program as presented?
Jim, can I ask a clarifying question?
Sure.
I'm not sure in any of the provided documentation where it provides the recommendation that we're voting on. And the packet here just presents the various options, but I didn't actually see a sentence that said what the recommendation is that we're voting for.
Well, it would be what we've heard about in the last two meetings, the hybrid learning package.
And if I could jump in, what would be helpful for us is to know that the board, how the board feels about the plan in its current state. It's going to evolve, it's going to continue to change a little bit based on information that comes out, but I would ask that the board consider voting on approving the plan as it is today, knowing that it's probably going to change before we come back together again next Tuesday, if that makes sense.
Is it possible to move the vote after audience participation so that people that wish to comment, we could take that into consideration before our vote out of respect for them being here?
Sure, I think we can do that. I think we'll just change.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea, Chris.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's fine. We'll postpone that until after audience participation. At this point in time, we'll entertain comments from the audience. If you're going to comment, we would ask that you come forward to that microphone, which is stage right, to be on your left, and address the board. We just ask that you give us your name and your address, and that you limit your comments to 3 minutes. And please understand that this is just a comment session where we want to hear your thoughts. You certainly are free to ask questions, but we won't address those questions specifically. We'll certainly take them under advisement. So if there's anyone who'd like to speak.
Hi, my name's Jason Funderburg, and I live here in Sycamore. I hope you don't mind me just not giving you my address for being televised, but I'm here in Sycamore. I've got 2 kids in the district, a 14-year-old and a 16-year-old. I want to thank the board for their volunteered time and for the additional time that you put in trying to make this all work and get us to a spot. Steve, welcome to the community. Thanks for joining us. I wanted to read, I'm glad you brought this up, Eric, but it was something from the CDC briefly, and it was updated on July 23rd, and then the part that I wanted to reference was something that was discussed on the 17th, and the best available evidence that we have indicates that, pardon me, school-age children appear to be a very low risk in contracting COVID-19 compared to the adults. Put it into perspective, the Center for Disease Control, and I should have prefaced that, this was done by the CDC. And it wasn't that long ago, but that 18-year-old and younger account for about 7% of the cases and less than 0.1% of COVID-19 related deaths, compared to that of the flu from 2004-5 through 19, that could be anywhere between 37 and 187 deaths by the flu. Obviously, none of these deaths are wanted or asked for, but it's a reality of life. There's going back to some of the other, I'd encourage you to look into the studies that have been done by the CDC and some of the reports. They talk about the transmissions. It's very, very limited with the younger, with the students in age group. So, some of your concerns might be maybe the teachers. Has there been thought to putting teachers behind plexiglass or something like that? If you don't have much transmission between the students themselves and there's a very low transmission or infection rate, then maybe if it's just protecting the teachers, can we do something in that regard? I don't know, you referenced we all did a survey was sent out to us. You referenced that 66% of the people in the community asked for 5 days in school learning. I don't know so that means that 36% or so wanted to do it online. If you were to consider those numbers, would we be able to take the 66% of the people that want their kids to be here and put them in school while they can still socially distance? So as I understand it from the CDC, their recommendations that you should be wearing a mask if you can't be 6 feet apart. Well, if we're wearing a mask, then we can be closer than 6 feet. But I could be wrong in that, but that's how I understand it. Things are changing all the time. But one of the options that we weren't given here yet today is the option for 5 days. We've been given an option for hybrid. We've been given an option for remote learning only, but we haven't been given an option for a 5-day plan. I appreciate you kind of curious, or your curiosity as to when we are going to get back to a full in learning. It doesn't sound like there's much optimism there, even though the data doesn't really reflect.
Thank you.
Am I through?
Yes, your time.
Appreciate your time, sir.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Jason Axt. I'm also a Sycamore resident. I'll try and keep my comments brief. Between last week's meeting and this week, my wife and I submitted, I think, 25 questions to the board, many of which have been answered. Thank you. In the hybrid plan versus the online plan, I'll limit my comments to high school. Our son is in high school. One thing that has not been mentioned at all is honors classes. which leads me to think they're not happening. Just speaking as a parent, I would like an excruciating level of detail as to what is offered via the hybrid plan versus the online plan, because it still sounds very vague to me, and it also sounds, pardon me, it sounds coercive toward steering everyone to the hybrid plan. Also, there's been several mentions of starting in hybrid mode for 9 weeks, and then or online for 9 weeks, and then flipping back and forth. I'm interested to know if that's a one-time switch or if that can be adjusted through the year. I was surprised to learn, or to hear, if I heard it right, there was minimal parent interest in being on a focus group. Both my wife and I are extremely interested in serving on that group. I can follow up with Dr. Webster about that. And I would respectfully suggest to pay close attention to the data for any other decisions as to adjusting the school year going forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Vernon Alexander. I'm also a resident of Sycamore. A couple questions and concerns, but one is I haven't heard anything else about KEC classes or dual credit classes throughout the presentation. Are they not going to be happening involving KEC this year? And if not, along with honors classes, are we looking at the possibility of doing something with credits? And are students still going to be held to the same amount of credits if they can't get into some of the classes that they're expected to get into for this fall? Next, your staff has done a great job. I appreciate that. But my question is, in case of where we have subs, what type of training are our subs going to have being able to prepare if they have to come in to do the remote learning or to come in and do the hybrid learning? And then last, I just recently looked at your list that you're still sending out for parents for getting equipment and their tool list and everything that they have. I think it needs to be updated, because if we're not going to be sharing anything, we shouldn't have that out there on the list now. Thanks so very much. And you're probably getting more questions from me tomorrow, though, as questions.
Thank you.
I might have to lower this. Can you hear me?
You're good. We can hear you.
Okay. My name's Kristen Miller, and I'm a Sycamore resident. We're in the southeast district, whatever part of Sycamore that is. But first I want to say welcome to our new superintendent. I'm a transplant to Sycamore, my husband and I hope you love it as much as we do. And just thanks to all of you. This is just an overwhelming situation for our volunteer board to be put in. So I just want to say thank you to all of you and all the staff and the teachers, and it's just hard on everyone. So you did an amazing job. I have a list of questions that some of my friends and neighbors who are out of town that might not have been able to watch, you did a really good job hitting all of our questions. But one big one I have is we have two, I guess you would say, rising sixth graders and a rising freshman. I echo the question about honors classes, how we're gonna handle that. And these kids had an abrupt end to their school year. And I said to my kids at dinner, is there any questions you want me to ask? And they were like, no, which group will I be in? I said, well, they're not gonna know that tonight. But, you know, I think my older one did say, orientation, is there something that we can do special for those rising groups of kids that I keep thinking my kids are going back to Southeast, which they're not. They were promoted from the 5th grade, thankfully, you know? And, you know, they've been in all of our buildings, but I think that adds, they don't know any of their teachers unless we happen to know them personally.
in the community. So I think giving some thought to how we can foster that transition. I think you did a good job hitting like the live teaching, hybrid, everything. But I think just the communication continuing. I know in my profession, we're trying to over-communicate. So whatever guidance you can give us about, I happen to have 3 boys, so lots of questions about sports. And, you know, I know that's not predicated by the district itself, but whatever you can give them about the fun parts of school too, I think will be good. Thank you.
Thank you. Can you use, yeah, that one, please? Thank you. That's okay. Take your time. It's a long hike from that side of the room. So.
Jennifer McCormick, 722 Fox Avenue, and the Sycamore Education Association president. First, I do want to thank the Board of Education for your work, as you aren't thanked very often, and it is a quiet commitment to our community. Also, I would like to acknowledge Steve Wilder being here. Wow, I didn't think I'd be this nervous with like 8 people. Yeah, it is a wild entry into our community, and we'll probably use that joke a lot. But we look forward to continuing to build our relationship. This fall, in many ways, feels like we're being asked to make a bit of a false choice because we don't have a lot of answers. Last week, the Sycamore Education Association shared with you 6 pages of questions, and we appreciate you thinking about those, and our superintendent also adding, adding, for lack of a better word, more answers to this. Those questions came from 140 individual contributors, and added the necessity for that document came from so many people reaching out to Andy and I in leadership. Planning meetings have been brought to a halt because we don't have answers to many of these questions, and so we look forward to more of them. We did survey our members in mid-July, and the information that we have for you from that is that 63.4% of our members do not believe it is safe to return to work right now. And probably a little more scary than that is that 29.1% of them have considered not returning. So that's a scary figure. As a board, you know that we have a 92% teacher retention rate. And I'm scared that we're going to lose some of those teachers. Most of our teachers have over 10 years of experience. I bring up this data as a reminder of the experience, knowledge, and dedication of the individuals that created these questions. The concerns for student and staff safety should cause us to pause and ask if we are doing the right thing. Should we consider delaying opening and going remotely to see what happens around our state and our country? And I think I'm so emotional because I really want to say we love our community, our students, and our colleagues. We look forward to a time when we can safely teach them in an environment that we feel secure in. And once again, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Andy Jordan, 430 Joy Drive. I'm a high school teacher here. I'm the Sycamore Education Association Vice President. While I was waiting here, I was thinking, I just turned 33 this summer, and I have been a member of the school district for 30 years. I went to preschool right across the hall there. My dad taught here and retired here. I worked at the Oscar program for 11 years right out of high school, and this will be my 12th year teaching. Wow. So to say the least, I'm very invested in this community, and I know how important the school district is. On that fateful Friday the 13th in March, when Governor Pritzker said that we are going into an emergency shutdown in schools, the last thing I told all my classes was, apparently this is not the safest place for us to be. Otherwise, we would be here. Thomas Franks, who was a great mentor at Oscar and now a North school principal, always told me at Oscar, we got to have safety and supervision. If we can't do those 2 things, nothing else matters. And I think that echoes in education. There are serious concerns for our students and staff. Labor management, we've had a lot of discussion about this. There is not a testing program in place. I don't think I ever would have thought that in March that I'd be coming back with the pandemic being the same and not have testing. I never thought I'd be coming back without a plan if there is a COVID case amongst students or staff. And I just want to reiterate, this is not a Sycamore problem. This is a global issue. This is a pandemic. That is a vocab term in Honors World Cultures for future parents. And this is something we have to address. We want to do what's best for kids. We all want to be back in school. We got to remember if we should. I hope the community understands that, and I hope it doesn't fall on the shoulders of our great volunteer board, our admin who's worked so hard, our support staff who's done so much, and our teachers who really want to be back too. If you want to blame somebody, keep going up top. It's not here. It's not in this room. There's other issues at place. Thank you for my time.
Thank you.
My name is Jake Brenz, 1503 Larson Street. I have a second and fourth grader at North, and I teach 8th grade English at the middle school here in town. The following questions assume that the top priority of the board and district leadership is the health and safety of our students and staff. Number one, why were parents asked in a survey about their comfort level with different social distancing measurements? Are we actually considering allowing students within 3 feet of each other despite continued best practice recommendation of 6 feet? I mean, that's what we're hearing. That's what we see posted everywhere, is 6 feet. 2, how will students entering the building be handled? Are we going to have someone there to enforce the 6 feet measure? Are we going to have someone there to enforce masks? Are we going to be taking people's temperatures? And who would be responsible for any and all of this? Number 3, who will be responsible for enforcing safety guidelines as it pertains to common areas, including hallways and bathrooms? If it will be teachers, is any additional training going to be required and provided? And we heard tonight about teachers having to scrub down desks. Well, I can't scrub down a desk and be in the hall watching people, so I think we have a staffing issue as well. Number 4, how can we ensure that parents will be taking the temperature of their children each day? If parents feel pressure to get back to work, hence the pressure for us to return to school, what will stop a parent from giving their child ibuprofen or Tylenol to mask the fever before sending them off to school? 5, and some of these issues have been touched upon tonight, but I'm going to just double down on it. Do we have a clear protocol for teachers and students following a positive diagnosis of COVID-19 within the school? I would hope that our response would not simply be at that point to reach out to public health officials and ask for guidance. In order to feel safe, we need to have a protocol in place prior to the return to learning, and this must be clearly communicated in writing to all stakeholders. And let's assume for a moment that all stakeholders believe that full adherence to health department guidelines would actually keep our students and staff safe. Does anyone actually believe that we can follow them 100% of the time? Assuming no, who decides what's an acceptable level of risk, and how will we know when we have met or exceeded that threshold of risk? You know, we talk about low transmission among students. We've had our students out of school. So I think the data is a little bit misleading, and when we thrust kids back into school, I think we need to consider what's going to happen. Finally, every health expert I followed during this pandemic has essentially said the same thing. We've always been 4 weeks away from crushing this virus. At any given moment, it would take 4 weeks to crush it. Unfortunately, we haven't exhibited the collective, selfless will to do the difficult things for those 4 weeks. So why do we think all of a sudden we can thrust our students back into crowded schools, even at 50%, and expect that everyone will do the right thing all the time? Short of well-reasoned answers to these questions, it's unreasonable to suggest that it's safe for us to return to school right now. And I think we should be spending our energy and our resources empowering our teachers and our students and our families to make the most of a remote learning environment until all stakeholders genuinely believe that it's safe to return. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that wants to comment? Well, then we'll close audience to visitors. And is there, at this point, I'll ask if there's a motion to approve the Return to Learn program as presented.
I'll move.
I'll second.
Motion and second. Discussion?
I have a few things. Ideally, I'd like to go back full-time like everybody would. And I still firmly believe that it's very likely that it will be out of our control and we will probably end up online at some point. But I think the plan that's presented is a pretty reasonable approach, taking all things into consideration, both safety and security as well as student learning and growth. There are a few things that stand out in my mind that in supporting this direction that I still think need to be addressed or considered going forward, and I just want to highlight them real quickly. One was just brought up, that we obviously will want to have some more protocols between now and the actual start of school for some of those issues as more information becomes available to develop them. That's still a moving target, I understand that. I think it would be, and I mentioned it earlier, that we have to be very serious about the disciplinary control over students entering, like it was just referenced, wearing masks, taking those things seriously, social distancing, and those types of things, and they cannot be just brushed over. I also think that, and I appreciate that we're starting 3 days later after last week's discussion. I think that's a good thing, but I think since we are going to be meeting weekly for the foreseeable future, at least for the next few weeks, that I think that should be a topic on the agenda each week to see where we are at, whether or not we are prepared as a district as a whole, and that we visit that question each week and ask ourselves, are we ready or not, and then consider if we do need to delay or make a change. And I'm sure you've thought of some of these things. And then the other thing that two other things jumped out in my mind was echoing some of the teacher training and support. I think I would be willing to spend a little bit of the budget to, or adjust some of the budget to allow for some tech support or training in light of potentially going online or being in the hybrid plan, that almost like a help desk, because I don't think that we probably have enough staff to be able to do that. I mean, Ed and Roxanne and all those people can't handle all those questions probably. So if we wanted to look at an outside source that might provide some type of tutorial help for teachers when they get into certain platforms, if they're having any trouble, I would be willing as a board member to say, let's provide some of that extra support going forward, particularly if we get to be forced online. And then the other thing that occurred to me was that as we're meeting on a weekly basis and talking about that online option as well, because again, I think we're probably going to end up there at some point, probably out of our control, that it might be helpful not only for the board, but anybody watching, to have maybe a couple of examples of what the lesson would look like online for maybe 5th grade down and then middle school and high school or something like that. I don't need an hour-long lesson, but basically, a 5-minute little explanation of here's what the lesson might look like if I have a 3rd grader or a 7th grader or a junior. And we could kind of just run through it as part of the presentation. That might help people have a little bit of better understanding compared to what they saw in the spring versus what we're thinking now. So those are my comments.
Other comments?
I just want to reach out to the teachers. We're in a bit of a quandary, obviously, where the majority of our parents want the kids to go back. The kids want to go back, and our teachers aren't quite comfortable. And I can completely appreciate where you're at. Professionally, I have to go into other people's places and businesses, their houses. When the stay-at-home order went first in March, I canceled I cleared my schedule for 3 weeks. I had appointments. I'm also a teacher for my profession. So I have your exact same view. I haven't taught a class in February because all my classes were canceled that I wasn't teach personally. But in August 12th, I will be going to Chicago, and I will be teaching, and I'm looking forward to that. We're taking precautions to do so, and I guess we as a district just have to make sure that we're preparing our staff and our teachers to make sure they have proper PPE. Am I anxious about teaching again in front of a bunch of other people? Also, the fact that it's going to be in Chicago, of course. But I also realize that that we do have to be, we're considered essential, right? And so I guess I would just encourage you to have some faith and to also have the courage for the good of our community to really try to do the best that we can do to move forward. So again, we appreciate you, and let's just keep moving forward if we can. Thanks.
I think I'd echo what you said, and I'd probably add to that in my 7, almost 8 years on the board, I don't think we've ever had a moment that was as defining, as transformative, as challenging to the public education system as the moment that we find ourselves in right now. And we've seen many threats along the way, whether they were budgetary or other voucher programs and those sorts of things that we've had to deal with. But I don't think we've faced anything quite like this. And I think this is going to be one of those moments that defines us. And just like other industries have had to make big changes and sacrifices along the way, we're going to be the ones next in line. And I don't know if that's, compare that to an upstaging or, a company that supports, concerts and conventions around the world on a daily basis, where suddenly those aren't being held for the next year or two. And what do they do overnight? Have to change their business into a, shipping and logistics and making PPE, or the restaurant owner that suddenly, can't have dine-in and over the next week without getting paid has to figure out how they're going to turn their business into a delivery and drive-through model. We're now faced with a similar challenge. How do we deliver education in this environment? And unfortunately, the stakes for us are not just about our own jobs or livelihoods, but of the children that we're sacrificing along the way. And every day that we don't have them in class and aren't providing an effective education for them is another, dream that's destroyed or opportunity lost, or, as the CDC points out, an abuse that goes unnoticed or a mouth that goes unfed. So the challenges and the stakes for us are very high. Not only that, if we don't rise to solve this problem, others will, and it's going to be the charter schools, and it's going to be the for-profit online schools that are going to come in and steal taxpayer money away from the public institutions, and they're not going to hire local teachers to fill those jobs, as we found out the last time they tried to come in through here and take taxpayer money. So it is really on us to find an effective way to get these kids back in class, a safe way to get them back in class. And right now, I think that the model that we've got strikes a good balance. I think it respects all of the guidance that's out there, and I don't think any teacher should feel like they're being asked to get within 6 feet of a student. And if you are, I hope you'll bring that to our attention, because it certainly seems to me that it's been communicated that our first priority is to make sure that the teachers have the social distancing and PPE they need to stay safe. And as far as the kids, we can certainly look at all the statistics about how there have been more deaths from, the common flu for that age group for the last 5 years. And I grant you, there's going to be more information that we're going to find out. This thing is constantly evolving, but it's also a false hope, I think, to put our faith into a vaccine that's going to come in the next 6 months or a year. The recent studies I've been looking at have just been suggesting that there will be no full vaccine. It's just going to be something like our current influenza vaccine that just makes it a little less deadly, but we're not going to have a zero-risk environment from this or anything else going forward. So this is that moment that defines us. You have my support for this hybrid model, and I hope that in the first 9 weeks that we and other districts around the world are proven correct, that this is still a safe environment to deliver education in, and that we're able to move back to something that looks traditional in the not-so-distant future, again, as that safety is proven. So thank you.
Other comments?
I think I've already expressed my my concerns, and I do not want you to think I'm downplaying all the work that's gone into the hybrid. It's just, I think we still have too many unanswered questions. The teachers just posed many questions that if I was still working in this district, I would have myself. I think we're rushing everything because everybody wants normal. There is no normal, and until we realize that's where we don't have a normal, we have to take it slower, not push everything back. There's just way, way too many safety issues that still were not answered, and I just have that fear for not only our children that are in this district, but I think everybody that works here. And as I said, I'm not downplaying all the work that's gone into what you've done, but it's still not enough to prove the safety that needs to be in place for everyone to return to these buildings.
Other comments? I think all of the comments are well-placed and well-said, and I'd just like to say that we did receive an enormous amount of input from our stakeholders, and I want them to know that we took all that input seriously, that we read through it, we considered it. Certainly, I hope you can tell by the questions that we asked that we pursued trying to get answers for some of the questions that are out there. Unfortunately, this is the type of situation where you can't have all of the answers at the present time. And some of these things are just going to have to unfold as we go forward. I think the important thing is that we need to move forward. We need to have a plan in place. And I think given the information that we have before us now, the guidelines that we have before us now, the recommendations that we have before us now, that a hybrid plan is the best way to go right now. That could change tomorrow. That could change in a week. We'll continue to meet on a fairly regular basis and discuss these comments and concerns that people have raised and that they will continue to raise. There were some very good points, I think, raised just in the comments this evening, and I think those we need to address. And I believe we will put in the time and we'll address those as best we can. You know, all we can do at this point in time is to start to commit to this plan so that people can start to plan their lives also going forward. I mean, we have an obligation to parents, to students, really to the community, to put some plan in place so that people can start to plan their lives and begin to deal with this situation as best we all can. Nobody likes where we are. Everybody hates this situation, and there are people deeply divided and on both sides of the issue, but in the long run, we want to protect the health and safety of our students. We want to protect the health and safety of our teachers, our staff, and we want to also try to deliver as best we can our full curriculum so that these students have every advantage that they possibly can. The longer we wait, the longer we delay, the more we deny them access to the system, you know, the greater the loss, I think, for them. So given the circumstances that we're under, I think that this is the best plan that we can put forward, and I think it's a good plan. It's a lot of work has gone into it, and a lot more work will go into it before it really takes effect. So it has my support as well. Other comments? Okay, there's a motion and a second. Roll call?
Shiloh?
Yes.
Davy?
No.
Jacobson?
Yes.
Jones?
Yes.
Nelson?
Yes.
Wren?
Yes.
Tombeck?
Yes.
Motion carried.
Thank you. Lacey, thanks for being here to fill in this evening. Appreciate that. Thanks to all of you for taking the time. Thanks to the people who are here in attendance this evening and who made comments. Please rest assured that we'll take those under consideration, and hopefully we'll have some information for you going forward. Is there any other business that we have? Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We stand adjourned.